Who confirmed that he had been in constant contact with family, friends, and even his wife's business associates, but to no avail since there was no evidence suggesting Ren Xian was in danger, and the time frame from the afternoon of May 2nd was less than 48 hours. The police did not open an investigation. They asked Xu Wenyu to return home and continue waiting for news. Returning home, Xu Wenyu searched everywhere, but Ren Xian was nowhere to be found. The next day, Zenu went back to the police station. This time, the police opened a case. Xu Wenyu told the police that his wife was the director of a medical equipment supply company in the city. On the morning of May 2nd, Ren Xian had gone to work as usual. She left the house around 6:30 a.m. with no signs of anything unusual. Suena did not work at the same company as his wife. He was an architect with a fairly flexible job. The couple had a long-standing rule of not interfering in each other's work. So Zhu Wenyu was not familiar with his wife's daily schedule and did not pay much attention to whom she interacted with. Zhu Wenyu did not believe his wife had run away, as she was very passionate about her job and would not leave it abruptly. Moreover, there was no reason for her to do so. Zenu also assured the police that he trusted Ren Xian completely and that she would not leave the family for someone else. The investigation team also ruled out the possibility of Ren Xian being kidnapped. As no ransom call had been received after 2 days, the police considered the possibility that Ren Xian might have had an accident on the way. However, after checking hospitals and morgues in the area, no unidentified victims were reported to quickly find Ren Xian. The investigation team deployed additional forces to search riverbanks and remote roads. Despite a day's effort, there were no results. The police then went to Ren Xian's company to gather information from her colleagues. Her colleagues reported that she had not shown up at the office. On the morning of May 2nd, her assistant revealed that early that morning, Ren Xian mentioned having personal matters to attend to and could not come to the office, asking her assistant and subordinates to handle her work after receiving information from her colleagues and assistant. The police had two main questions first. If Ren Xia did not go to the company, where could she have gone second? Why did Ren Xian lie to her husband about going to the office? When Zhenu claimed they always trusted each other and never deceived one another, the police initially felt something was off. They decided to investigate the victim's social relationships, starting with Ren Xian's husband Zenu. According to neighbors, the police learned that although the couple appeared to be very loving, their relationship was not as smooth as it seemed. A few days before Ren Xian disappeared, neighbors heard the couple having a major argument. One curious neighbor went over and saw the door close tightly with loud noises coming from inside, resembling the sound of glass breaking. The neighbor, fearing that the continued argument could lead to something serious, tried to intervene. Despite this, the alarming sounds continued. This information heightened the police's suspicion. They began to consider the possibility that J.W. Wenham might have harmed his wife and then staged a disappearance to mislead the investigation while keeping a close watch on Jay Wen's behavior and actions. The police received a report of an unidentified female body found under a bridge not far from Gina's home. The investigation team quickly dispatched officers to the scene to verify the situation. The forensic examination revealed that the victim was a woman between 30 and 35 years old, about 1.68 million tall, who had died 2 to 3 days prior. The time of death nearly coincided with Runzan's disappearance. The investigation team, now more suspicious, invited Renshan's family to identify the body upon seeing the body. Renshan's younger sister, Rening Shu, tearfully confirmed it was her sister, noting the similar appearance, hairstyle, and clothing. However, Zenu adamantly claimed that the woman was not Renzan. This conflicting identification confused the police. Why were the two people closest to Renzian giving different opinions? Following their previous line of reasoning, the police thought the body could indeed be Renzian, suspecting that Jay Wenu might be denying it. To prevent the truth from coming out to verify this, they conducted a DNA analysis. However, the results showed that the victim was not Renzian. Despite this, the investigation team remained suspicious of Xu Wenyu. They asked him where he was and what he did on May 2nd, knowing he was under suspicion. Xu Wenyu was surprised and somewhat upset to prove his innocence. Juwena stated that after his wife left on May 2nd, his colleague Exo Chenu picked him up for work. Exo Chenu had seen Ren Jian drive away, so the police's suspicions of Xu Wenyu harming his wife were unfounded. When the police questioned Zhou Chenu, he confirmed seeing Ren Jian drive past on the morning of May 2nd. Moreover, X Chingu and Zhu Wenyu worked together the entire day, providing Xu Wenyu with an alibi. When Xu Wenyu couldn't contact Ren Jian, he appeared very worried and asked Zhou Chu to help search for her throughout the night. With this, Yu Wenyu was ruled out as a suspect. The case began to stall for several reasons. First, there was no clear evidence indicating whether Ren Jian was in mortal danger. If she was, who was responsible? As more days passed, the whereabouts of Ren Jian remained a mystery. To quickly find Ren Jian, her family and relatives printed missing person flyers and posted them all over the streets, hoping someone would see and report back. Nearly 2 months had passed since Ren Jian was last seen, and her family continued to hold out hope for her return. However, some feared the worst, believing she might have met with a fatal incident on July 15th. The Hunan Provincial Police announced the discovery of a severely decomposed female body in a ravine at Mount Song. The identity of the body was yet to be confirmed. The victim was described as a woman between 30 and 35 years old with long black hair, wearing a wedding ring engraved with the names Xu Wenyu and Ren Jian. Additionally, she wore an expensive-looking watch on her left hand and a gold heart-shaped necklace. After analyzing the scene, Honan police concluded that it was not an accident. The victim's clothes were disheveled and torn in several places, suggesting a struggle. All the bones were broken, indicating she was likely pushed from a height. The police considered this a particularly serious murder case and promptly began an investigation. News of the female body found in Mount Song's ravine spread quickly across the country. Xu Wenyu saw the report on TV and was alarmed by the similarities between the victim and his wife. The detailed description of the ring necklace and watch matched perfectly with Ren Jian's possessions. Causing Zuan in great distress, he immediately drove to the Hunan police station to confirm the identity. Upon seeing the remaining personal items, Xinu was certain that the victim was his wife. Ren Jian DNA analysis confirmed that the deceased woman was indeed Ren Jian, turning the mysterious disappearance into a Serayu's murder case. Zhu Wenyu revealed to the police that his wife loved visiting temples. Though he couldn't understand why she would go to such a distant one, he was also at a loss as to who could have committed such a brutal act. Despite the investigation team's efforts to gather clues and narrow down suspects, the complexity of the crime scene, the passage of time, and the rain washing away evidence, along with the severe decomposition of the body, made progress difficult. Consequently, the investigation did not yield any significant leads. The case of Ren Jian became a source of fear for the residents around Mount Song, as the perpetrator was still at large. What terrified people even more was that shortly after her disappearance, a series of similar incidents occurred in the area, causing the investigation team great distress. Specifically, on June 13, 1997, a tour group from Hub Province visited Mount Song around 12:15 p.m. A young woman named Lu Jing, 20, wandered off from the group to enjoy the scenic path behind Shean Temple. When Lu Jing did not return, the tour leader became worried and asked the local police to search for her. However, the vast area of Mount Song made it challenging to locate one person. 5 days later, Lu Jing's body was found in a ravine halfway up the mountain. She was naked, her hands tied behind her back with rope and her mouth taped shut. Recognizing the seriousness of the case, the police launched a large-scale search around the scene but found no additional evidence. However, they noted that the perpetrator's methods were very similar to those in a previous case involving a girl who had been raped and murdered at the base of the mountain. The police suspected a connection between the two cases. On May 1, 1997, in Mawang Village, at the foot of Mount Song, 13-year-old He Lingling vanished on her way home from school. Her body was discovered in a wheat field on May 24th, in a condition strikingly similar to that of Lu Jing. As the police grappled with these three cases, another 13-year-old girl, Yao Huang, was found dead in a deep roadside ditch on the morning of September 13th. 1997, you was a classmate and neighbor of a Lingling. Police statistics revealed that since 1996, numerous rape and murder cases targeting women had occurred in the mountain ravines, dense forests surrounding famous temples on Mount Song and village roads at the mountain's base. By 2001, the death toll had risen to ass, with victims ranging from 11 years old to a woman in her 50s. Despite 5 years of intense investigation, the police had failed to identify any suspects in mid-April 2001. Ren Chang became the chief of Danong City Police Department, known as the Goddess of Police, and a famous law enforcement figure in China. Ren took personal charge of the investigation and formed a new task force upon hearing the case. Details after analyzing the evidence. The investigative team theorized that the perpetrator was a local resident with a fixed address near Mount Song, possibly using a special identity or profession as cover. A female officer went undercover to lure out the killer, but for over 2 months the Mount Song area remained peaceful. With no suspicious activity, the police suspected the perpetrator was aware of their actions and was hiding on Mount Song itself. The investigative team decided to mislead the killer by reducing police presence on the mountain roads, hoping to make him believe the danger had passed around 5 p.m. on July 23rd. 2001, Jingping, a female employee working at the Sheon Temple office, was waiting for customers with her tricycle. A man about 40 years old and dressed like a monk hired her to take him to Lino. Temple Jingping parked her tricycle at a lot 3 kilometers from the temple and walked with the monk up the mountain to retrieve some items by 6:40 p.m. All the tourists had left and the mountain path was deserted at a fork. In the path, surrounded by dense vegetation, the monk suddenly turned around, grabbed Jingping by the neck and dragged her into the forest. He tied her hands tightly with rope and attempted to tape her mouth shut, realizing she might be killed. Jingping pretended to comply, pleading with her attacker that she would do anything. He asked if he spared her life. The attacker left after assaulting her without causing further harm. After escaping, Jingping immediately ran down the mountain to report to the police, providing a detailed description of the Salant with information from Jingping. The police focused their investigation on the area around Lina Temple and nearby temples. The nuns at Lina Temple mentioned that a man fitting Jinping's description named Wang Shang had stayed there. His background was unclear and he had insisted on staying. Despite being asked to leave a few months earlier, Wang Shang had been beaten for theft and had since disappeared. The abbot of Yuangang Temple confirmed that a toist named Wang Sang had also stayed there a few months prior, claiming to be gathering firewood and medicinal herbs on the mountain. Determining that the suspect was nearby, the police set up ambushes in and around the temples, blocked the only road leading into the mountain, and stationed checkpoints along the path down the mountain next to Shaolin Temple. Finally, on the evening of July 24, 2001, Wang Xing was apprehended by the police. Jingping identified him as the man who had assaulted her the previous day. Wang Zong was immediately taken to the police station. Despite intense questioning, he refused to say anything at night in his cell. Wang Zhang would often shout that he hated women and men alike. Hearing this, the police were puzzled. Although they did not know the reason for his outburst, they sensed that the suspect had likely experienced some traumatic event leading to his unstable mental state. They tried various methods to calm him, attempting to understand and soothe his emotions in hopes that Wang Gang would eventually reveal the truth. However, their efforts seemed ineffective on the 4th day after his arrest. Wang Zong unexpectedly asked a police officer what the punishment would be for killing one person. The officer responded that it depended on many factors. Wang Zong then asked what the punishment would be if there were multiple victims. These questions made the officer more cautious. Sensing an opportunity, the officer gave a clever response. He explained that if the punishment might be reduced and the death penalty could even be avoided. Hearing this, Wang Zong began to waver. He sat in deep thought for over 2 hours before deciding to confess everything. Hoping for leniency, Wang Zong revealed his real name was Wang Dongfang, a 30-year-old from Chuzhou village in Yuanyi City, Honan province. He was the elder of 2 brothers. Despite their affluent economic status, his family was unhappy. The wealth came from his father, Wang Dongyi, who was notorious for his thefts. Wang Dongyi was also known as a violent husband and father, frequently beating his wife and children, leaving them covered in bruises. Additionally, he often brought young women home and slept with them. Wang Song's mother, Safuan, was no better, abused by her husband and unhappy with her life. She had an affair. When this was discovered, she was beaten and eventually left the family. This left Wang Dongfang and his brother living with their father and his mistresses, enduring constant abuse from both. Wang Dongfang dropped out of school before finishing elementary education. He started hanging out with local delinquents, engaging in bullying and petty theft instead of punishing him. Wang Dongyi encouraged these behaviors, believing that a son should surpass his father. In 1994, Wang Dongfang started dating a girl named Gillen from his village. Gillen was 2 years younger, pretty but arrogant and often disrespectful. Throughout their relationship, she frequently became upset and threatened to break up to prevent her from leaving him. Wang Dongfang indulged her every whim, even resorting to theft to give her money. Wang Dongfang believed that his sincerity and sacrifices would win Gillen's affection. However, one day he visited her unexpectedly and found her with another member of his gang. Furious Wang Dongfang swore revenge on both of them, fearing his threats. Gillen and the other young man went to the police and reported Wang Dongfang for theft, knowing he was wanted by the authorities. Wang Dongfang went on the run for 6 months. He evaded capture by moving between different towns during the day and committing petty theft at night. His criminal activities became more sophisticated over time, realizing that his fugitive lifestyle would eventually lead to his capture. Wang Dongfang decided that the most dangerous place might also be the safest. He returned to his hometown in Hunan and moved to the Mount Song area in Yangzhou City. There he changed his name from Wang Dongfang to Wang Shang and posed as a Taoist priest using fortune telling to scam people out of their money. In the period following his arrest, Wang Dongfang's psychological state became increasingly erratic. Living on the mountain for an extended period, he developed a compulsion to touch and hold women's hands during fortune-telling sessions. He could sometimes indulge this urge, but it did not fully satisfy him. He grew particularly agitated when couples visited the temples together. Feeling jealous and increasingly determined to possess women, initially Wang targeted only young, attractive women. However, finding this too limiting, he decided to attack randomly, regardless of age or appearance. On May 2, 1996, Ren Jian, visiting from Sichuan province, came to Mount Song for sightseeing. She began her day early, visiting Shan Temple, Sona Pagoda, and other spots. Later, she walked alone along the mountain path toward the mysterious Lina Temple. Seeing her alone, Wang Dongfang followed her. Halfway there, he noticed Ren looking lost and needing help. Emerging from the bushes, he greeted her with A8B. Seeing the monk, Ren respectfully asked for directions to Linoa Temple. The monk warmly offered to guide her after a long, strenuous walk on the steep terrain. Ren grew exhausted, seeing her sweating profusely. Wang suggested they rest. Ren sat on a rock, admiring the scenery and praising its beauty. When she asked the monk if he felt the same, she turned to see him lunging at her. Wang grabbed and kissed her aggressively, tearing her blouse. They struggled for a while, and Wang demanded she comply with his sexual advances, threatening to kill her. If she resisted, enraged by her refusal, he pushed her off the cliff. Hearing her desperate screams, Wang felt elated rather than scared, even smiling as if nothing had happened. More than 2 months later, Renshan's body was found on May 1st, 1997. Continuous rain had increased humidity, blanketing the area around Mount Song and fog, making visibility poor and reducing visitors. Desperate to satisfy his urges, Wang ventured down the mountain and spotted He Lingling, a young student walking alone. He followed her to the eastern slope, where, seeing no one around, he grabbed her using tape to gag her and rope to bind her hands. Wang led her to a nearby wheat field. After assaulting her, he suffocated He Lingling until she died on June 13, 1997. A large number of tourists visited Shaolin Temple, creating an ideal opportunity for one to strike at around 11 a.m. A group of tourists from H arrived at Mount Song at 12:15 p.m. Lu Jing, 22, separated from the group to enjoy the Scenery along the wooded mountain path behind Sheon Temple while she was admiring the view. Wang approached her from behind. Lu Jing politely greeted the monk without a word. Wang seized the moment, taping her mouth shut, tying her hands and dragging her to a ravine. Midway up the mountain, he quickly stripped her and assaulted her. The more Lu Jing struggled, the more violently. Wang acted her body was severely scratched from being pressed against the rocks. After satisfying his desires, Wang strangled her until she died. Before leaving, he conceived a perverse idea, remembering the girl who had betrayed him. He was filled with rage, associating Lu Jing with his ex-girlfriend Gu Ling. Wang decided to mutilate her body brutally. He used a stick to repeatedly attack her genital area and violently pulled at her breasts. Lu Jing's body, left naked by the stream, was not discovered until 5 days later. Exposure to the elements and insects accelerated decomposition. Realizing that younger girls were easier targets, Wang began focusing on this demographic on the afternoon of September 12th. 1997, Wang Dongfang descended from the mountain once again in search of prey. This time, he followed a lone schoolgirl walking home. The girl, 13-year-old Yoing, was a classmate of the previous victim. He, Ling Ling Wang, deliberately approached Yao, claiming to be a pilgrim who hadn't eaten and needed help. The naive Yao offered him some of her pocket money, which Wang refused, saying he only needed food. Yao then suggested taking the monk to her home. Wang pretended to follow her, but quickly attacked once they reached a secluded area. Despite Yao's tears and pleas, Wang showed no mercy. He dragged her into bushes, sexually assaulted her, and intentionally mutilated her genitals. Finally, he dumped her body in a deep roadside ditch. The entire crime went undetected in the following period. Due to increased police involvement, Wang became more cautious. Despite the authorities' efforts, they couldn't prevent the sex-crazed criminal from continuing his depraved acts disguised as a monk. Wang brazenly appeared in public, even observing crime scene investigations, as the police had yet to identify any suspects. Wang grew increasingly cocky, looking down on law enforcement's abilities. Wang's actions became more frequent and brazen, expanding his range of targets. He later confessed to police that from 1996 to 2001, while hiding in the mountains, he had sexually assaulted 19 people and murdered 7. Wang sought victims in temples, mountains, and on remote roads at the mountain's base, targeting people of all ages. His youngest victim was 11 and the oldest was 60. Wang revealed that he typically wore tossed robes to scam people for money, but dressed as a Buddhist monk when committing crimes. Constantly changing his identity, this tactic kept people off guard and avoided police suspicion. During his confession, the sex-crazed killer seemed proud. Even boasting about his professionalism, one claimed that outwitting law enforcement so cleverly wasn't something just anyone could do upon realizing he couldn't escape the death penalty. Wang reacted strongly, refusing food and repeatedly banging on his cell door while shouting when brought to trial. Wang flashed a contemptuous smile. He argued that the occurrence of so many serious crimes over 5 years demonstrated police incompetence. The killer even claimed that if he had received proper training, he would surely outrank these officers. Wang Dongfan's string of shocking crimes outraged the entire Chinese population. In September 2001, he was sentenced to death. A large crowd gathered to witness his execution when the sex-crazed killer fell. The crowd cheered enthusiastically. Even Wang's parents were horrified by his action. They didn't attend his execution, fearing attacks from victims' families. After more than 5 years of terror on Mount Song, the sex-crazed killer Wang Dongfang had committed countless brutal crimes, terrifying people across China. Many believe that the failure to catch the killer after the crime led to devastating consequences, resulting in numerous deaths. Fortunately, the perpetrator was eventually brought to justice. This case also exposed individuals and organizations hiding behind religious facades to profit or commit wrongdoings, desecrating religious beliefs. However, as some Neens commented, these people ultimately got what they deserved. Story 2, every child born with innocence and purity is an angel gifted to their parents. There's a saying, a child without a mother is like a tree without roots. However, a recent court ruling in Canada has brought many to tears and sighs over the fate of a little girl named Chloe. Chloe's birth captured the attention of many Canadians, but her death caused even deeper sorrow. People wondered, was it the mother's negligence or the failure of Canada's welfare system that led to this tragedy? In March 2024, the Ottawa court convicted the 30-year-old boyfriend of Chloe's mother on 6 charges, including willful neglect leading to Chloe's death. By the end of June, he was sentenced to 14 years in prison without parole. Then in early July 2024, the media revealed that the girl's mother was also charged with similar allegations and would stand trial in January next year. There's a saying, even a tiger doesn't eat its young, but when humans turn dark, they may not recognize their own kin. This case is very rare. Media agencies had to battle through multiple rounds of litigation to gradually shed light on and report the case. Consequently, we had to work hard to gather information about it. Let's go back to Sunday, May 10th, 2015, which was also Mother's Day on Air Canada. Flight AC-009 from Calgary to Tokyo, flying over Russian territory at thousands of meters above the Pacific Ocean. Most passengers were asleep and the cabin was very quiet. Suddenly, a noise came from the rear economy class. A young man frantically called for the flight attendant while his girlfriend clutched her stomach in apparent pain. The flight attendant hurried over and asked what was happening. The man said, "I don't know. My girlfriend suddenly has severe stomach pain at this point." The flight attendant quickly assisted the woman to a more spacious area at the front of the plane. However, halfway there, she could no longer bear it and had to lie down on the floor. The captain immediately called for any experienced passengers to help, and 3 doctors among the passengers came forward to assist. After receiving N4 and Tylenol, the woman was moved to a first-class seat. She then said to everyone, "Something is about to come out of my stomach." A doctor beside her quickly asked, "Are you pregnant?" The woman shook her head. The man, still bewildered, said, "We only had relations last month." She can't be pregnant at this point. No one cared about those details anymore. The doctor instructed the woman to breathe deeply and push. Soon after, the cries of a newborn girl echoed through the cabin, bringing relief to everyone. Nothing bad happened, and both mother and baby were healthy. The young mother made it just in time to celebrate her first Mother's Day. The passengers on the plane each took turns congratulating her. It was truly a special miracle. The flight attendant thoughtfully wrapped the newborn girl in a blanket. At this moment, a photograph that would later shake Canada was taken. The captain, encouraged by the good news, flew the plane with renewed spirit. Finally, the flight landed at Narita Airport in Tokyo. Half an hour ahead of schedule, the Japanese ground medical team had been informed in advance and were ready to take immediate care of the mother and baby. This young couple, who gave birth at an altitude of 10,000 m, met online. They had only been dating for about a year and were living together in Victoria, British Columbia, Canada. Their trip was to visit a relative in Japan, with the plane tickets provided by the woman's family. The woman's name was Guan, who was just 23 years old at the time, and from Calgary, Alberta, she had a temporary job. The man, Wesley Branch, was 24 years old, and from Penticton, British Columbia. He was a former employee of a moving company and was currently unemployed. The newborn girl was named Chloe, the first grandchild in the Branch family. The news brought great joy to Chloe's paternal grandparents. However, one detail caught the attention of some observant individuals in media interviews. Wesley often spoke while A.A. only talked when directly addressed. Consequently, the public frequently saw Wesley holding there. This dynamic laid the foundation for their future relationship. Of course, in the days following Chloe's birth, both the baby and mother stayed at a very good hospital in Tokyo, Japan. Once their conditions were stable, they were discharged and moved to their relatives' home in Japan. During this time, Japanese and Canadian media extensively covered the event. Thanks to this coverage, Chloe, Ada, and Wesley received many necessary baby items donated by Japanese citizens, as well as support from the Canadian Embassy in Japan. Chloe's birth certificate and passport were processed expeditiously, and the embassy even gifted the young couple a baby stroller. The family happily returned to Canada shortly after. CBC Radio interviewed them with a host particularly interested in the hospital experience and costs for the mother and baby in Japan. Wesley responded that the Japanese hospital services were excellent, and in the end they only had to pay 2,000 Canadian dollars. We might not be very familiar with Japan's healthcare system, but 2,000 Canadian dollars for a few days in a hospital for uninsured foreigners in Tokyo doesn't seem too high compared to the thousands of dollars a day in the US without insurance. It's quite reasonable, however. Even this 2,000 Canadian dollar was not a small amount for the young couple. They had to set up a GoFundMe page to help cover a portion of the hospital expenses. Later, the CBC host asked the question on everyone's mind, when did you realize you were pregnant and about to give birth? I replied, when I was moved to first class on the plane. Wesley immediately added I was having severe contractions. In first class, I was right beside her, holding her hand tightly when we checked her body. We saw our daughter's head. It was crazy. That's when I realized I was about to become a father. The host, still in disbelief, asked, you really had no idea you were pregnant? I responded, no, I just thought I was gaining weight, which happens to me often on the plane. I was terrified because of the intense stomach pain and thought I was dying. Wesley interjected, we did suspect something was off, but a test a few weeks earlier showed 99.99% that she wasn't pregnant anyway. A miracle happened. I'm so proud and happy we have such a lovely daughter. Finally, the host asked a very important question. How does it feel to suddenly become a mother? I glanced at Wesley several times and then they looked at each other. Wesley hugged and said, we are very excited. We will overcome all difficulties. Wesley said, I will do my best to take good care of this little family. Notably, according to Air Canada's official website, pregnant. Women can fly if they have no history of preterm labor and are not. Beyond 36 weeks of pregnancy, typically babies born between 38 and 40 weeks are not considered premature. It is unclear if was considered premature, although it said she occasionally had stomach pains. Her doctor did not detect her pregnancy during regular checkups due to A's small frame. No one, including the airport ground staff, recognized her as pregnant. Some media speculated that A was 37 weeks pregnant regardless. The airline wanted to send their congratulations to her and her family. However, a news program couldn't resist joking that although the baby born on the plane was very healthy, the mother might need to pay a fine for carrying an extra piece of carry-on luggage. This incident captivated Canadians at the time, as babies born on planes are very rare. The first known in-flight birth occurred in 1929 in Florida, USA. The most recent happened on January 19, 2023, on an Emirates flight from Tokyo, Japan to Dubai. A 2020 article in the International Journal of Travel Medicine tallied in-flight births on commercial flights from 1929 to 2018, totaling 74 cases, or roughly 1 per 26 million passengers. Nearly the same odds as winning a lottery jackpot. However, among these 3 newborns did not survive. This rarity explains why many airlines prohibit pregnant women from flying between 38 and 40 weeks. The thin air at high altitudes is not conducive to newborn breathing, and their ears are very sensitive to air pressure. Additionally, medical capabilities on planes are very limited with a lack of medical personnel and equipment. While a normal delivery might be manageable, a cesarean section would pose significant risks to both mother and baby. Furthermore, the nationality of newborns is a complex issue. Planes are considered extensions of their registered country's territories, but the skies they fly through belong to different nations. Some countries grant citizenship based on birth location, leading to potential nationality. Ambiguities for babies born on planes complicating legal processes. For example, Chloe is clearly Canadian, but immigration lawyers have pointed out that if she were born over USA airspace, she might be eligible for U.S. citizenship. Chloe was fortunate at birth, but no one anticipated the hardship she would face. Upon returning to Canada, Wesley's mother told the media that A and Wesley were immature parents, unprepared for Chloe's sudden arrival. They didn't know how to care for their daughter or understand her needs, leading to frequent arguments. When Chloe was less than a month old, a social worker from British Columbia asked Wesley's mother to spend a week helping the new parents with some guidance. She stayed at AA and Wesley's home in Victoria by invitation. To her surprise, Wesley asked her to take Chloe for a month so they could go on vacation. At that moment, Wesley's mother realized the couple was too selfish and trouble was inevitable. However, after helping care for Chloe for a week, she left Victoria and returned home indeed in August 2015, 3 months after Chloe was born. Due to A and Wesley's escalating arguments that risked violence, British Columbia's welfare agency removed Chloe from their care and placed her in temporary foster care. By the end of 2015, Aya and Wesley had broken up AA, then returned to Calgary, where she had grown up consequently. British Columbia's welfare agents transferred Chloe to Alberta's welfare agency by early 2016. Alberta's welfare agency officially took over Chloe's guardianship. However, Chloe's tragic fate continued. Ada's father, Sam Guan, and her stepmother, Lily Wong, had been married since the late 1990s and lived in Calgary. Lily had 3 sons from a previous marriage, making them Ada's half-brothers. One of them, Boss Wong, became the family spokesperson in Chloe's case. Boss stated that Alberta's welfare agency placed Chloe with Sam and Lily. When she first arrived, Chloe was very shy and easily frightened, showing signs of insecurity. It took some time before she began to trust their love and gradually opened up. Chloe started to interact with those around her, living a happy and joyful life like any other child. During Sam and Lily's care for Chloe, Alberta's welfare agency arranged weekly visits with her biological parents for what was supposed to be family time. However, social workers noticed that A and Wesley often found excuses to cancel these scheduled visits even when they did attend. Their attention was clearly not on their daughter. They appeared distracted and reluctant. It was evident that their presence was merely obligatory, as Alberta's social workers gradually concluded that A and Wesley were unfit to be parents. They began to ask Sam and Lily if they would consider adopting Chloe as family. Sam and Lily then held a family meeting. They expressed their willingness to adopt Chloe with A's half-brothers, offering strong support and promising to help whenever necessary. According to rumors, Sam and Lily even submitted the necessary paperwork for adoption. Alberta's welfare agency also interviewed them regarding the matter. However, to everyone's surprise, Alberta's welfare agency ultimately decided to return. Chloe, Tueta, Sam, and Lily were deeply disappointed by this decision. Social workers explained that the government always prioritizes reuniting children with their biological parents. As a result, Chloe, then 3.5 years old, was returned to her mother, at the end of 2018. In February of the following year, Ada moved to Ottawa with Chloe to live with her new boyfriend Justin, whom she had met online. This time, Justin assumed the role of a father figure in Chloe's life. From that point on, ceased all contact with her biological father, Sam, and stepmother Lily. Consequently, they had no further news about Chloe then. On the afternoon of May 15, 2020, after pandemic restrictions were lifted, Chloe returned to her mother. About a year and a half later, just 5 days after her 5th birthday, Chloe was found dead, wrapped in a filthy blanket in her bedroom at their home in Ottawa. It was only then that Justin reluctantly called for emergency services. The forensic report revealed that Chloe's bladder had ruptured a week before her death, but no one took her to receive medical treatment. As urine gradually accumulated in her bloodstream, Chloe suffered from acute renal failure, which eventually progressed to end-stage renal disease. Leading to her death, medical experts stated that end-stage renal failure causes extreme pain, vomiting, inability to walk, loss of bladder and bowel control, and ultimately seizures and coma. The judge stated that Justin knew that taking Chloe to the hospital would prompt questions about her old injuries. Justin admitted during police interrogation that he had voiced these concerns to his girlfriend. AA testified in court that she had suggested not taking Chloe to avoid angering Justin. Rumors suggested that Justin was a controlling person with deep-seated insecurities. Due to pandemic isolation policies, he had developed a severe drinking problem which exacerbated his violent temper. Told the judge that she could no longer endure Justin's abusive behavior towards her daughter. But whenever she tried to break up with him, he threatened to kill both her and Chloe. As for what caused Chloe's bladder rupture, the forensic report could not provide a clear explanation. In the 7 days following Chloe's bladder rupture, Justin and A's only actions were searching the internet for ways to save Chloe. They looked up topics like how to feed a child after vomiting, why constipation makes walking difficult, why 5 days of rest still did not improve mobility, whether low blood sugar causes dizziness, why fainting occurs, and what to eat after fainting from these searches. We can imagine the tragic final days Chloe endured despite Justin's numerous excuses to mitigate his culpability. He claimed that on the morning of Chloe's death, she appeared healthy and cheerful, even calling him Dad. He said he helped her change her diaper and had breakfast together. However, the forensic report indicated that Chloe was in a critical condition. Likely comas at that time, these false statements, which did not align with the facts, only made him appear more untrustworthy. In June 2021, a year after Chloe's death, Justin was officially arrested by Canadian police. Due to the pandemic, the case didn't conclude until June 2024. 3 years later, Justin was sentenced to 14 years in prison. Initially, the prosecutor hoped for a 16-year sentence. While the defense lawyer argued that this was Justin's first offense, the lawyer also claimed that Justin had mental health issues and had suffered a troubled childhood with an abusive stepfather. Therefore, the court should give Justin a chance at rehabilitation, believing that a 16-year sentence was too harsh and suggesting 10 to 12 years as more reasonable. Ultimately, the judge settled on a middle ground of 14 years, looking back at the entire case. A severe oversight was discovered. Chloe was never placed on the radar of Ottawa's welfare agency. No legal department from any province had informed them about Chloe's situation. Sadly, it was only after the tragedy that Ottawa's welfare agency began to investigate. By then, it was too late. Currently, it is unclear whether Alberta's welfare agency continued to monitor Chloe's situation after handing her over to Ada. Did they know that was moved to Ottawa? If they did, it's evident that Alberta's welfare agency did not transfer Chloe's file to the relevant authorities in Ottawa. Did they close Chloe's case and stop following up? The most critical question is why Alberta's welfare agency returned Chloe to Ada, and how Ada convinced social workers to grant her custody. Many questions remain unanswered and may never be answered, because Alberta's welfare agency has stated that Alberta's PR privacy laws prevent them from discussing any specific cases. It's evident that there are flaws in the Canadian government's operational mechanisms. If these gaps are not addressed, similar tragedies are likely to occur in the future. As for Chloe's biological father, Wesley, it was his and the paternal grandparents' demand for answers that allowed the Ottawa court to let the media cover the case. Wesley told the media that after his breakup with Ada, he had no idea where Chloe was. He was devastated when he received the call from Ottawa police informing him of his daughter's death. He blamed himself for not trying harder to remain in Chloe's life and felt betrayed by the government system that failed to change the outcome or fate of his daughter. He said, "I am living in a nightmare every day." Dear viewers, this is a human tragedy. While I may not be able to detail the entire process of the case, I feel deep sadness and regret for these victims. I only hope that parents around the world can give their children the love and care they deserve, and that there will never be another. Chloe was born fortunate, receiving global attention and blessings, but tragically into an unkind and irresponsible family throughout this case. One perplexing point is that Ada was clearly unfit to be a mother, yet she insisted on keeping custody of Chloe. The decision by Canada's welfare agency is also baffling. They overlooked the loving paternal grandparents and handed Chloe back to Ada. What's more infuriating is that they didn't check on Chloe for a year and a half afterward. They should have at least informed the relevant welfare agency in Ottawa. Right, currently, only Justin has been sentenced to prison, but we believe that ADA, who has also been prosecuted, will soon receive her due punishment. Story 3, Ontario County Sheriff's deputies are asking for your help tonight, finding a missing man. They say 31-year-old Adam Chase went missing on June 14th on 2012 in Ontario County, New York. A man left his home after having an argument with his wife. Initially, his family thought he just needed some time to cool off and would return once he calmed down. However, after a few days passed with no sign of him, the family grew concerned and reported him missing to the police. They also sought help from the media to appeal to the public for assistance in finding him. Months of searching and waiting passed, but eventually they only found a set of scattered white bones. Even more surprisingly, the remains were discovered right within the family's home. What secret did this disappearance hold, and who was the silent perpetrator behind it all? Welcome to Crime Documentary Files. Let's rewind to about 6 p.m. On Thursday, June 14, 2012, a woman named Rose Chase, 30, drove to her in-laws' house to pick up her son before leaving. She mentioned to her mother-in-law that she and her husband Adam had argued that morning, after which he stormed out and hadn't been seen all afternoon. Rose's mother-in-law felt a bit worried upon hearing this, but she thought she understood her son. This was a small rural area and he didn't have many friends. Even if he was still angry and didn't come home tonight, he would surely go to his parents' house to sleep. So she reassured Rose to go home, saying Adam would return by nightfall the next afternoon. Adam still hadn't come back. His mother called Rose to ask if he had returned home, but Rose said Adam hadn't come back all night and hadn't called either. At this point, his mother was genuinely worried. She asked Rose what had caused such a serious argument. Rose explained that Adam had been playing video games nonstop at home, so they had tried to talk about it the day before. Unexpectedly, the conversation quickly escalated into a fight. Rose said Adam had punched a hole in the wall out of anger and then left without taking his wallet or car keys. After hearing Rose's explanation, his mother decided to call the police. She was concerned that without a car or money, Adam couldn't have gone far and feared he might have done something reckless or gotten into danger. By June 18th, Adam had been missing for 4 days. Local residents enthusiastically organized search teams to help the police, also sent search units throughout the village, including to Rose and Adam's house. When the police, accompanied by search dogs, arrived at the house and asked Rose if they could search inside, Rose happily agreed. However, she warned the officers that the house was very messy, asking them not to mind the clutter upon entering. Everyone saw that Rose wasn't exaggerating. The house was indeed a mess. This 3-bedroom, 1B 50-square-meter home was filled with chaotic piles of belongings. Clothes were heaped on the beds like mountains. Drawers were overflowing and the floors were littered with electronics, toys, and even snacks. The entire house barely had any clear pathways. It was hard to imagine how they lived there daily after inspecting the cluttered first and second floors. The officers led the dogs down to the dark basement. However, as soon as they stepped down the stairs, a foul odor hit their noses. Rose explained that the basement's plumbing had a leak that hadn't been fixed yet, and she hadn't had time to hire someone to deal with the rats and bugs, so she suggested that the unpleasant smell might be due to dampness and animal remains. The officers and their dogs searched the basement but found nothing suspicious, except for some scattered tools, puddles in the corners, and dead cockroaches on the floor. In the following weeks, more and more locals joined the search team. They combed through every nook and cranny of the village but found no trace of Adam. Strangely, Adam's family told reporters that on June 19th, the 5th day after Adam left home, they received a text message from him. It said, "I'm at a friend's house and need time to think." However, they never heard from him again after that. Chase's sisters say there were 2 texts on June 19th, one to each of their parents. It said, "Staying with a friend in Canandon, need time to think." This message raised suspicions with Adam's parents and the police. They mentioned that Adam would typically call directly if there was an issue, and he had never sent a text message like this before. Therefore, they believed that someone might have impersonated Adam, implying that his disappearance likely involved external interference. However, the police showed little concern over this. They advised the family to be patient and wait for good news instead of getting worked up over imagined scenarios. Adam's disappearance, initially lasting a few weeks, extended into several months. Over time, the family's bad feeling grew stronger since they and the police could not agree on how to approach the case. The family had no choice but to seek help from a private detective. The detective who took on the case was Ronnie Miller, an old friend of Adam's father. Adam had grown up under Ronnie's watchful eye. He knew that no matter how angry Adam might get, he would never abandon his family after evaluating the current clues. Ronnie agreed with the family's suspicion that something bad had happened to Adam. But if Adam wasn't truly missing, then where could he be? The answer to this question was clear to them all, none other than Rose Adams' wife of 11 years, Adam. "If you are seeing this, can you please come home to your family? They really do miss you, and if anybody knows where Adam is, please contact the Ontario County Sheriffs." so this way the family can know how he is and that he's okay. The family turned their attention to Rose, not only because she was the last person to see Adam, but also because her behavior over the last few months and even years suggested she had a motive to harm her husband. Since 2007, 6 years into the couple's marriage, Adam's family had suspected Rose of infidelity, however lacking concrete evidence, and with Adam staunchly defending his wife, the matter was eventually dropped. However, just a week before Adam's disappearance, a relative spotted Rose acting intimately with an unknown man in a neighboring town, fearing they might be mistaken. The relative quickly took a photo with their phone, although the picture was blurry. Adam's family recognized Rose by her features and clothing when the family showed Adam the photo. He was deeply shocked at the time. Adam said he would find time to talk to his wife, but shortly after he vanished, this gave the family reason to suspect that Adam's disappearance was somehow connected to Rose. Additionally, over the past few months, Rose had consistently avoided answering the family's questions, such as about the day they argued and what was said that provoked such a strong reaction from Adam. Because if, as Rose claimed, they argued about his gaming, why would Adam be so furious that he punched a wall and left without contacting his parents? Adam's family believed Rose's explanation was full of contradictions and were convinced she was hiding something. However, when they voiced their suspicions to the police, they were repeatedly dismissed for lack of evidence. She had said that we were harassing her. The investigators actually called us crazy. Adam's family then protested in front of Rose's house, trying to draw the police's attention and put pressure on Rose. However, they were eventually driven away by the police and warned that such actions could be considered harassment. As time passed, Adam had been missing for nearly 6 months. Private Detective Rodney and Adam's family were still working tirelessly on the case, but their energy and spirits were nearly depleted. Rodney figured that if those seeking the truth were this exhausted, the person hiding it must be equally worn out, so he decided to give Rose a scare, hoping it might shake her enough to reveal the truth. Surprisingly, this tactic worked on December 13th, 2012. Rodney stood at Rose's front door. He sternly told her, "You've been in a lot of pain. I know, but now I have enough evidence to charge you. Tell me, where did you bury Adam?" As soon as Rodney finished speaking, Rose collapsed to the ground. Trembling, she cried and said she hadn't buried Adam but had cremated him. The location was in her mother's backyard. Hearing this, Rodney immediately informed the police, requesting a search of Rose's mother's property. There they found a box containing ashes along with scattered human bone fragments in the bushes nearby. Throughout this process, Rose stood by and watched. She quietly apologized to Adam's family, but otherwise her emotions remained unchanged. Finding Adam's remains confirmed the family's intuition from the start, but now they faced an even more painful reality. What had Adam gone through before he died? Why were his bones scattered on his mother-in-law's property? If it was the heat of the moment and you thought enough was enough and you pushed him, you pushed him. It's what it is. I don't know if I actually gave him that extra next. I will use interrogation excerpts as supplemental material to recreate the events of the day. Adam and Rose had their conflict. But before we continue the story, let's learn more about the personalities and backgrounds of this couple this way. Everyone can better understand their perspectives and points of conflict and evaluate who might be telling the truth. Rosen and Adam's fate intertwined back in high school. Rose, a year younger than Adam, was introverted and struggled to make friends. Additionally, she had a reading disorder which made her a frequent target for bullying at school. Her mother said that Rose preferred playing with small animals over socializing with others. Adam, on the other hand, was different, although recognized as a computer geek. His cheerful and slightly quirky personality made him well-liked among his peers. Initially, the two were just friends. As they moved into high school, they gradually grew closer. Both families recall that Rose and Adam shared a love for science fiction novels and movies. They often visited Renaissance fairs together. After a period of stable dating, they decided to get married. Rose was 19 and Adam was 20 at the time. Friends and family were overjoyed for them. However, the young couple quickly faced their first challenge. Doctors diagnosed Adam with abnormal sperm, meaning they would need a significant amount of money for treatments if they wanted to have children. At the time, their financial situation was tight. Rose worked as an assembly line worker at a weapons factory, while Adam ran his own small business. After careful consideration, they decided to let nature take its course and not try too hard for a child. In 2007, 6 years into their marriage, Rose was blessed with the birth of their son, Tristan. The couple was overjoyed, especially Adam, who saw this miraculous child as a gift from above. Shortly after Tristan's birth, Adam decided to quit his job to become a full-time stay-at-home dad. Although this arrangement seemed unusual to others, it was a division of labor that worked well for them. For years later, in 2011, Rose was promoted at work. Their improved financial situation allowed them to buy a house near Adam's parents. With his parents' support and Tristan about to start kindergarten, Adam began planning to return to work. Their lives seemed to be entering a more stable phase. However, in reality, their marriage had been showing cracks for a long time. Rose told the detective that since Adam had quit his job to stay home, he had become addicted to gaming. Adam would alternate between playing Xbox and online games, staying up late to play, sleeping in until noon the next day, and then continuing to play. He would eat junk food when hungry and relieve himself in cans. Several times, Rose came home to find their son dirty, his diaper unchanged. Rose said they argued about this many times, but after a brief period of imper movement, Adam would always revert to his old habits. Feeling neglected and cold-shouldered, Rose admitted to having affairs and multiple boyfriends. This continued until the day of the incident. June 14th, Rose said both she and Adam took the day off and sent their son to his grandparents because they wanted to have a serious conversation. However, this time the discussion was not about gaming, but about the photo Adam had seen. Rose explained to Adam that although she had indeed kissed the man in the photo, nothing more had happened between them, but Adam didn't believe her. He said that despite his deep love for their son, he now doubted whether the child was even his. The argument escalated, with both of them growing more agitated when Adam suggested a DNA test to determine paternity. Rose felt there was no point in hiding anymore. She bluntly told him that there was no need for a test because the child was not his hearing. These words from his wife, Adam, punched the wall in. Anger at this moment, a physical confrontation broke out between them. Rose said that during the struggle, Adam somehow tripped and fell down the stairs from the second floor, lying motionless at the bottom. Rose explained to the detective that she wasn't sure if Adam was still alive at that moment, but the reason she didn't call the police or an ambulance was that she thought his death might be more beneficial to her. Knowing Adam was aware he wasn't the child's father, if he insisted on a divorce, the judge would likely rule in his favor. Rose feared she would lose custody of her child. Her earnings and her retire savings would be taken for alimony. In short, if Adam lived, she would lose everything, so she chose to let him die naturally. Rose said that before picking up her son that afternoon, she pushed Adam, who was unresponsive at that point, down the basement stairs, positioned him sitting against the wall folded forward, and then hid him under a pile of clutter. She claimed, "I didn't expect that 4 days later the police would bring search dogs to my door." Rose felt relieved when the dogs didn't detect anything suspicious, which allowed her to escape immediate danger. Rose safely passed the initial search. Her cooperative attitude during the investigation led the police not to suspect her as a criminal. So, for many months afterward, whenever Adam's family raised suspicions about her, the police maintained a cautious attitude and did not investigate further. However, Rose knew she couldn't hide Adam in the basement forever. By July, as the temperature rose and the smell of decay became stronger, she knew she had to act quickly before attracting attention. Therefore, at the end of July or the beginning of August, although she couldn't remember the exact time, about a month after Adam fell down the stairs, she moved his body to her mother's house and cremated him in the backyard. Upon hearing this, the police asked how she transported Adam's body and if she used any tools to dismember him. She said no, that Adam's body had broken apart naturally during transportation. Rose placed each part of Adam into the trunk of her car and drove along with her son to her mother's house, which was about a 20-minute drive away. According to Rose, her mother knew nothing until the police arrived. As for her son, Tristan, who was only 4 years old, he witnessed everything, unknowingly believing his mother's explanation that the smell in the trunk was something they needed to get rid of on the day of the interrogation. Rose Chase was charged with second-degree murder evidence tampering and 2 other charges on October 8th. 2013, Rose's trial officially began since no video recording of the trial was found online. We will summarize it for you first. We start with the indictment. The prosecutor accused Rose of intentionally causing her husband's death. She then lied and deceived law enforcement and the victim's family for 6 months. During that time, she even destroyed and burned the body to eliminate evidence because the victim, Adam, had been cremated. The forensic doctor couldn't determine the cause of death. Therefore, the prosecutor strongly refuted Rose's claim that Adam died from a fall down the stairs. He argued that from beginning to end, Adam did not fall on his own but was pushed by Rose in response to the police's charges. The defense lawyer countered with the argument that you can't kill someone who is already dead. The defense lawyer took advantage of the inability to determine the cause of death, insisting that the victim, Adam, had stopped breathing as soon as he fell down the first set of stairs. He acknowledged that Rose didn't call the police, didn't try to save her husband, and even pushed him down another staircase case and hit his body in the basement. But he argued that all these actions were not premeditated. Therefore, he argued her crime should not be second-degree murder, but rather a lesser charge such as manslaughter. Many people believe the defense lawyer argument was a cop-out, but given the existing evidence, what he said was indeed a possibility. Meanwhile, Adam's family sat below, tears streaming down their faces for them. The truth had turned to ashes. Along with Adam at this moment, they only hoped that justice would deliver a fitting punishment for the criminal. Finally, on October 18, 2013, after 7 hours of deliberation, the jury reached a verdict. They found Rose Chase guilty of second-degree murder. Notably, the judge sentenced Rose to 24 years and 4 months to life in prison. The earliest she will be eligible for parole is April 2037. That is also due to the Chase family because they are the people that kept the pressure up on Rose Chase, and I think been a long time coming. Yes, very difficult to get through. Call it mother's intuition, but I knew something was definitely wrong. My son always called me when something was up. Always either me or his dad. My son can rest. Currently, Rose is incarcerated at Bedford Hills Correctional Facility for Women in New York. In an interview, she told a reporter, "I did not commit the crime everyone accuses me of." She insists that Adam's death was an accident, but his family seeking revenge framed her and ensured her imprisonment, facing Rose's lack of remorse. Adam's family has declared they will attend every parole hearing to ensure she serves her full sentence and is not easily released after the incident. 4-year-old Tristan was adopted by Adam's parents. To them, whether Tristan is biologically Adam's child is irrelevant. They love him deeply and celebrate every milestone in his life. Tristan is now 16 years old and has a long journey ahead. We wish him the strength to overcome his family's burdens and walk confidently and successfully into the future. In conclusion, Adam Chase's case is a heartbreaking tragedy, offering many lessons about marriage, family, and the justice system. While Rose Chase faces a severe punishment, the pain and loss experienced by Adam's family can never be fully compensated. Story 4, Kuka Nozaki, a billionaire renowned for his obsession with women from his youth to his old age, was willing to spend a whopping 3 billion yen to have relationships with 4,000 different women. He didn't hesitate to spend money to marry a wife young enough to be his granddaughter. These are the characteristics the Japanese people think of when they mention the successful businessman Kuka Nozaki. Then something shocking happened at the age of 77, just 3 months after marrying his young wife. This magnate suddenly died, found naked with no clothes on. The news was a huge shock, leaving the Japanese public stunned and shaken. What exactly happened to this wealthy man at 10 p.m.? On May 24, 2018, a call was made to the Japanese police reporting that 77-year-old billionaire Kuka Nozaki had suddenly died in his 2-story private villa. Authorities immediately dispatched personnel to the scene, cordoned off the area, and began the necessary investigation procedures. Upon arrival, police conducted a preliminary check of the victim's body and estimated that Nozaki had died within 2 to 3 hours before the call around 7 to 10 p.m. Although there were no external injuries, the autopsy revealed something strange. A lethal amount of stimulant was found in his system, and the cause of death was acute circulatory failure. Even more peculiar was that Nozaki typically did not use such drugs. No stimulants were found anywhere in his office home or car. The police suspected this could be a deliberate murder case due to the numerous suspicious point statements from the wife and butler. At the time of Nozaki's death, his young wife and male butler were at home. Both were considered suspects. The butler named Taka had once run a small bar but moved to Nozaki's house as a butler for over 30 years. After going bankrupt, Nozaki's wife Saki Sudo looked so young she could have been his daughter. She was 22 years old, 55 years younger than Nozaki Pudo. A former model with a voluptuous figure, had also been a popular adult film actress. Her family was not well off, and despite her seemingly demure appearance, she led a rather indulgent lifestyle. She was known to be an alcoholic, lazy, money-hungry, and frequently visited nightclubs. The police took statements from these two regarding their allies on the night of May 24th. P. Sudo's account was as follows. That evening, he and I were lying in bed together watching a sumo match. About 6 hours after the match ended, the butler called out, "Madam, dinner is ready." So I went downstairs to eat. At that time, my husband said that I should go ahead and eat and he would eat later. He didn't want to eat and would stay in bed to watch another sumo match after dinner. I stayed on the first floor until 10 p.m. before going upstairs to sleep. That was when I discovered my husband naked on the sofa with his head tilted back. I ran over, but Nozaki was already unconscious. Based on their statements, it appeared that Nozaki had died. While Sudo was downstairs, the police speculated that it was possible Nozaki had ingested the stimulant to commit suicide while alone on the second floor. However, repeated checks found no injection marks on his body statement from a close friend. The police, however, considered the suicide theory unreasonable because Nozaki's assets amounted to hundreds of billions of yen. A few days before his beloved pet dog died, he had called a close friend and asked if the friend could come to bid farewell to it. The friend had been present that day and remembered it well. As it was May 6th, the friend recalled that although Nozaki was saddened by the sudden death of his beloved dog, there was no way he would commit suicide with vast assets and a young, beautiful wife living happily. The idea of Nozaki suddenly choosing to end his life seemed absurd. The suspicious death of his beloved dog. Even more suspicious was that the billionaire died 18 days after his beloved dog had also died. Under mysterious circumstances, those close to Nozaki knew he adored his dog and often said he would leave his estate to the dog. After he passed away, upon hearing this, the police decided to investigate the story of Nozaki's dog. They exhumed the dog's body for an autopsy, suspecting it might have been killed by a stimulant injection. However, contrary to the police's expectations, no stimulants were found. Friends of Nowaki noted that he loved his dog more than his young wife. While working, Nosaki would occasionally call home to ask the butler about the dog's well-being. Did the security cameras capture anything upon reviewing footage from the 8 external cameras? The police found no signs of anyone suspicious attempting to break in from the outside. Only 2 people were inside the house. The butler and Nozaki's young wife. The police started to consider who would benefit most from Nozaki's death. All suspicions pointed to the primary suspect, the young wife Pudo. After gathering statements and conducting an initial investigation, Sudo emerged as the prime suspect for several reasons. Firstly, despite her initial seemingly frantic statement, she quickly became preoccupied with establishing her alibi to the police, showing no sign of grief or sadness over her husband's death. Secondly, during Nozaki's funeral, Sudo appeared cold and indifferent, even casually playing games on her phone. Thirdly, after Nozaki's death, Pudo requested an art company appraise a painting owned by Nozaki, suggesting she planned to sell at least one of his valuable artworks. Fourthly, a few weeks after the funeral, Sudo swiftly moved to liquidate Nozaki's assets. She unilaterally appointed herself as president of his company and transferred over $300,000 from the company's treasury to her bank account, planning to relocate abroad. However, Sudo claimed she had no reason to be suspected. She argued that she was disadvantaged by her husband's death because there was a condition in their marriage that required Nozaki to deposit 1 million yen into her bank account. Every month from the day they married, Pudo insisted that Nozaki's death left her at an emotional and financial loss. But the situation appeared far more complicated than PSE Pseudo's simple explanation. Shortly after the police discovered a suspicious detail in Nozaki's will, the document stated that Nozaki would leave 3.5 billion yen of his assets to Pudo. Immediately before his death, Nozaki's total assets were around 5 billion yen, meaning he left almost all his wealth to Pseudo. If this were true, Nozaki's death would benefit Pseudo immensely, not just marginally. The police questioned Pudo, "Is this handwritten will genuinely?" From Nozaki, Pudo scoffed, "Ridiculous, are you suggesting I forged the will, and what's wrong with my husband giving me a monthly allowance of 1 million yen? Police responded, "No, I didn't mean it's an issue, it's just a bit confusing. Anyone could see that the young wife stood to gain the most from Nozaki's death." However, the police lacked evidence to prove Pseudo was the murderer. Additionally, Pseudo continued to deny any involvement in her husband's death, maintaining her silence against all accusations from the police. The case was widely reported in the media, and many mocked the police for their incompetence in finding evidence, while it seemed obvious to everyone else that the young wife was the culprit. Nozaki's rags to riches story also became a hot topic, once dirt poor. Nozaki was born in Tanai-Wakama Prefecture in 1941, the third of 7 children in a struggling family. He left school after junior high to start working and support himself. After finishing junior high, he worked at a foundry collecting iron powder and scrap iron to sell to junk dealers, saving every penny because he had no money and wasn't attractive. No women were interested in him. This made Nozaki envious of the wealthy men who were always drinking and cozying up to beautiful women at bars. His own reflection was the stark opposite, akin to something out of a horror movie or a tale of misfortune. One day, Nozaki saw an ugly man at the next table enjoying the company of 2 beautiful women. The man pulled out several 10,000 yen notes from his wallet and stuffed them into the women's bras. Seeing the women appear so happy, Nozaki realized that money controlled everything. Nozaki resolved to make money by any means necessary. Nozaki made money by collecting leftover scrap metal and iron powder from factories and selling them to junk shops to earn extra cash. He took a job delivering beer to entertainment districts at night one day. While delivering beer, he found a white object in a ditch and picked it up. It turned out to be a condom. Nozaki realized that while everyone knew condoms were sold at Fai's, many were too embarrassed to buy them with a bit of boldness. He started buying condoms wholesale and began selling them at entertainment venues. At that time, the average office worker salary was 15,000 yen, but a box of 12 condoms sold for 1,200 yen. Nowaki made a lot of money without worrying about the stigma of selling condoms. He quit his job at the liquor store and began selling condoms seriously with the money he earned from selling condoms. Nozaki decided to bet his life on the stock market. He made a lot of money from stocks as his earnings became uncontrollably high. Nozaki thought luck was smiling upon him and decided to try his hand in the Tokyo real estate market. Later in his book, Nowaki mentioned that the biggest gamble of his life was jumping into the Tokyo real estate market. In addition to his success in real estate, Nowaki ventured into the liquor trade, finance, and private lending markets, becoming a self-made man. Well known in Japan, having endured much mockery in his youth for his humble beginnings, Nozaki now became a man who could buy the company of any beautiful woman. Later, Nozaki told a reporter about his success story, boasting that he had been with about 4,000 beautiful women and spent around 3 billion yen on them. He didn't hesitate to brag that there was nothing money couldn't buy. His memoir, titled "The Man Who Bought 4,000 Beautiful Women with 3 billion yen," was published in December 2016. Another book published in April 2007 was titled "I Want to Sleep with Beautiful Women Until I Die." In February 2016, Nozaki and a 27-year-old model were involved in a robbery at his home where 6,000 yen in cash and precious metals worth 54,000 yen were stolen. This incident made the news. Nozaki responded, "Well, that's not much money to get worked up about. I don't consider it real money. I'll take it as a life lesson." Even after losing such a large sum, he saw as a valuable life experience, and the story became a hot topic after numerous fleeting romances and love affairs exchanged for money. Nozaki unexpectedly decided to settle down and marry a 22-year-old model named Pseudo on February the 8th, 2008, according to their accounts shared with the media. One day, Nozaki fell at the airport and Pseudo helped him up. He thanked her and invited her to dinner. They hit it off and fell in love. Nozaki recounted that he fell for her because she seemed pure. Unlike the other women he had met, they quickly started dating and decided to get married in an interview with Kendai Business. A few months before his death, Nozaki confidently stated that he would always be happy. Being married to Pudo, the seasoned businessman ignored all warnings about staying away from a woman 55 years younger who might be after his vast fortune. It seemed that while Nozaki had sharp instincts in business, he let his guard down entirely in his personal life with Pseudo if Pseudo did kill her husband. What other motives besides money could she have had? After a period of happiness, someone revealed the truth about Pseudo to Nozaki. They showed him pictures of Pseudo before her plastic surgery, revealing that she was not a model but a former adult film actress. Nozaki was furious to learn that she had arranged for someone to push him down and then pretended to help him at the airport. He couldn't stand the betrayal and the feeling of being used for his money. Finally, after seeing pictures of her before surgery and photos of her with another man, Nozaki decided to divorce her. He called Pseudo, confirmed the truth of the revelations, and informed her about the divorce, afraid that her husband would leave her for someone else. Pseudo tried to hold on to him but was unsuccessful. According to Japanese media, before his death, Nozaki seemed to have grown tired of his wife and was considering divorce. The reason was that since their marriage, Pudo had stayed in Tokyo and refused to move to Tanai to live with her husband. During this time, the 80-year-old old tycoon was rumored to have had relationships with several other women before his death. Nozaki was romantically involved with Miss AA finalist in the Miss World Japan competition. Miss was 25 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, and significantly more beautiful and elegant than Pseudo, since Pseudo didn't return to Tanai. Nowaki decided to end things with her and marry someone new. Nozaki's decisiveness put Pudo at risk of losing her luxurious lifestyle. This was seen as a motive for her to kill him to seize his vast fortune. The police theorized that Pseudo feared being left with nothing if divorced, so she plotted to murder Nozaki to inherit his wealth. However, PSE Pseudo's lawyer claimed she was innocent. Despite the prosecutor's claims, there was no concrete evidence that she directly committed the crime. For a time, the case seemed to be forgotten by the public after 2 years of deadlock. The sudden death of the naked tycoon Nozaki once again drew significant public interest as new details emerged in 2020. When a drug dealer was arrested, the police traced the dealer's clients and found PSE Pseudo's phone number on the list. This indicated that Pudo had contacted the drug dealer, possibly buying drugs to poison Nozaki. Upon re-examining the crime scene, police found traces of stimulants on the floor and in the vacuum cleaner at Nozaki's home in early 2021. While inspecting PSE Pseudo's personal items during the investigation, police discovered her computer search history contained entries on how to buy and use stimulants. Keywords like murder and how to buy stimulants were also found. This suggested that Pseudo had meticulously planned her husband's murder on April 28, 2021. Pudo was arrested as a prime suspect in Nozaki's murder on May 19, 2021. The Waka Prefectural Prosecutor's Office charged Pudo with murder and violating stimulant drug laws, according to police sources cited by Manichi. Pudo decided to remain silent and await the trial process to appeal. To this day, the case of Pseudo Saki killing her husband continues to stir public opinion in Japan. Whenever it is mentioned, driven by insatiable greed, the former adult film actress ultimately faced retribution. Not only did she fail to inherit the money, but she also faced severe penalties for murder. The fate of the once flamboyant billionaire became a never-ending topic of discussion. He enjoyed a life of luxury, but met a tragic end because of it. Story 5, Irvine, a city in California, is a favorite among the Chinese community located in Orange County, southeast of Los Angeles. It's about an hour's drive away, according to 2020 data. Irvine's population is around 300,000, with Asian Pacific Islanders making up 45%. This makes it the city with the highest density of 280 Asian Americans in the entire United States. Notable companies in Irvine include Blizzard Entertainment, the polarizing game company Taiwan's Foxconn, and the hard drive giant Western Digital. Our story's main character today is Sun Hanli. A chief engineer at Western Digital. Sun Hanli was born on July 1, 1977 in Yantai, Shandong Province. China, as a traditional Shandong student, his diligence and effort are unquestionable. Anyone who has interacted with Sun Hanli can attest to this. His outstanding academic performance allowed him to be directly admitted to the finance department of Zhejiang University without taking the college entrance exam after graduating from high school. Moreover, just a month after enrolling at Zhejiang University, another opportunity arose at that time. The National University of Singapore and Zhejiang University had a cooperative project intending to select 32 outstanding students from Zhejiang University for free education at the National University of Singapore. With his excellent academic record, Sun Hanli was fortunate to be selected. He successfully moved to Singapore after graduating from the National University of Singapore. Sun Hanli pursued a master's degree in electronic engineering. Upon obtaining his master's degree, he worked at Seagate Technology, a well-known hard drive company. Impressively, Sun Hanli not only succeeded academically and professionally, but also did not delay in finding a life partner. Sun Hanli had a high school sweetheart named Chin Haoing, who was also from Yantai, Shandong. She was both his hometown friend and high school classmate. We do not know what this beautiful girl looks like as we searched the internet, but couldn't find a single photo of her. However, I guess in Sun Hanli's eyes, she must be an absolute beauty, as he loved her deeply and passionately despite leaving Shandong for Zhejiang and later studying abroad in Singapore. Sun Hanli never stopped loving her during his time studying in Singapore. Sun Hanli helped Chin Hang obtain a work visa so she could stay in Singapore. He also helped her find a job as a nurse on February 6, 2003. Sunday Hanli and Chun Hang got married in Singapore for years later. In 2007, their son David was born in Singapore. Although the family of three lived a prosperous life in Singapore, the young couple decided to pursue their American dream while they were still young. A year later, in February 2008, Sun Hanli received a high-paying job offer from Western Digital, the American hard drive giant. The family of three smooth immigrated to the U.S. and settled in Irvine. By 2011, Sun Hanli began seeing a Chinese dentist named Luan. Due to their shared heritage, communication was smooth, and Sun Hanli also brought his wife and son for regular dental checkups there. As their visits became frequent, the two families gradually became close. Dr. Luan and his wife, who is also a dentist, worked together in the same clinic. Knowing that Chun Hang had nursing experience in Singapore, they invited her to work at their clinic. Sun Hanli was happy that his wife found a new job. However, after Chun Hang started working at the clinic, Sun Hanli began to face increasing betrayals, and the relationships among everyone involved became increasingly complicated and uncontrollable. On Saturday, July 18, 2015, the weather in Irvine, California wasn't great. The temperature was 75 degrees Celsius with winds at 9 miles per hour, and the sky was overcast, suggesting rain around 1:20 p.m. The Irvine police received multiple calls reporting a stabbing near a dental clinic. 5 minutes later, at 1:25 p.m., Officer Chambero was the first to arrive on the scene. Stepping out of his vehicle, he saw a white Mercedes SUV crashed into the entrance with the hood completely crumpled. Not far from the car in the bushes lay Dr. Luan, a 54-year-old dentist, motionless on the ground. Clinic staff member Chun Hang was attempting to administer first aid nearby. Another clinic employee named Christo was leaning against the wall, bleeding from his leg. Looking terrified at the unfolding events, the scene was crowded with witnesses, and a curious crowd had gathered around. Men and women mixed. Many pointed to an Asian man standing near the Mercedes, telling the police that he was the perpetrator, 38-year-old Sun Hanli. Once the police had Sun Hanli under control, paramedics rushed in to replace Chun Hang and performing CPR on Luan. At this point, the police noticed Luan had stopped breathing completely, with multiple visible stab wounds on his chest, though they were no longer bleeding. Officer Clark retrieved an automated external defibrillator to try and revive Lewin, but after several attempts, it was clear it wasn't working. When the rescue team from the fire department arrived, 2 officers began setting up a perimeter around the area as more police and investigators arrived. Witnesses were separated and individually questioned. One witness, a 64-year-old man named Oza, said he had an appointment at the dental clinic that morning but arrived late close to noon because he was busy. He met Dr. Luke Sen at the clinic entrance, who was leading 3 staff members outside. Dr. Ellickson chatted with Oza, mentioning they were heading out for lunch and inviting him to return at 1 p.m. During their conversation, Dr. Lewin mentioned he had been experiencing back pain. Recently, Oza shared that he had similar issues in the past but had found relief using a topical medication. He promised to bring some for Dr. Lucien when he returned. Dr. Lewin thanked him and then left with his staff. Oza said he returned to the clinic around 12:45 p.m. Dr. Lewin and his staff were still not back, so he waited in the lobby near the entrance. Shortly after the man who stabbed Dr. Lewin entered through the front door, he walked straight to the dental clinic door and saw a sign that read, "Closed for lunch, will return shortly." Oza assumed this man was also a patient of Dr. Lewin. After the man left, Oza went outside to wait for Dr. Lucen. Moments later, the same man returned driving a white Mercedes SUV, moving slowly as if looking for Dr. Lucen. A few minutes later, Oza saw Dr. Lewin and some staff getting out of a car and walking towards the entrance. Just as Oza greeted Dr. Lewin, the white Mercedes suddenly accelerated, hitting Dr. Lewin and throwing him to the ground. What shocked Oza even more was that the driver got out and started beating Dr. Lucen. At that moment, Oza didn't realize the attacker had a knife until another passerby wrestled with him and took the knife away, making the severity of the situation clear. AA immediately called 911. Another witness, David Alden, 67, said he and his wife were sitting on a bench outside the church. When the incident occurred, the church Woodbridge Community Church is across from the building housing Dr. Lou's clinic. Separated by a public parking lot behind the church is a gathering place for the Jewish community. Since it was a Saturday, there were many elderly people around from activities at both locations, providing numerous witnesses. David recounted that he and his wife heard a loud noise, turned around, and saw a white car crashing into the building. Across the street, an Asian man jumped out and began attacking another man on the ground. At this point, a woman tried to intervene, seemingly to stop the attack, concerned for her safety. David, despite his age, rushed over. He quickly reached the scene and struggled with the attacker. David said he repeatedly tried to push the man away, but he kept yelling at the woman. The surrounding people were also shouting, making it hard for David to hear the conversation. Eventually, another bystander, Gary, joined in to help. Together, they managed to pull the attacker away from the woman. At that moment, David heard someone in the crowd shout, "Knife! He has a knife!" David said he didn't see a knife, but instinctively grabbed the attacker's arm and used his body weight to pin him to the ground. The attacker then ceased resisting and started shouting, "He deceived me. He ruined me." The police also interviewed another helpful witness. Gary Winkler, a 63-year-old pastry shop owner. Gary had just finished participating in church activities. When the incident occurred, he was heading towards building C1 next to the church when he heard the crash. As he rushed over, he saw the attacker assaulting a man on the ground while people around were screaming and calling for help in vain. Gary pulled the attacker away from the woman, only to be warned by bystanders that the attacker had a knife. That's when he noticed the Asian man holding a knife about 8 inches long. Gary managed to wrestle the knife away from the attacker just as David pinned him to the ground, according to witness and clinic staff accounts. The story unfolded as follows. Gary handed the knife to his friend Modi, who carefully placed it on a nearby green electrical box and stood guard to ensure no one touched it. Gary shouted at the attacker, "Are you crazy? You killed him." Soon, Hongel responded, "That's exactly what I wanted to do," in an interview with Zat, a clinic employee. The police gathered more crucial information. Zet, an Iranian dental assistant at the clinic, identified the attacker as Sun Hanli and the victim on the ground as Dr. Lucien. His boss Zet had worked for Dr. Lewin for 6 years, and his colleague Chin Huang had been there for 4 years, handling paperwork and finances during Chun Hong's tenure. Her husband's son, Hanli, had visited the clinic many times as a patient, so everyone knew him. However, rumors later surfaced that Chun Haiying and Dr. Luan were having an affair, which led to Dr. Luan's divorce from his former wife, Dr. Jun Lia. Dr. Jun Lia specialized in cosmetic procedures. Previously, the couple worked in separate rooms but shared clinic space in room 100. Even after their divorce, they continued to share the clinic for a long time. 2 days before the incident, Dr. Jun Lia moved out but remained in the same building now in room 130. About 4 months before the incident, Dr. Jun Lia confided in Zat that her husband was having an affair with a ping pong coach. 3 months later, Zat was surprised to find that the coach had become his colleague. A month before the incident, Dr. Lucen introduced a woman named Christo to Zata, saying she was the new receptionist and asked Zet to show her some basic procedures. Christo mentioned she had no medical knowledge but was a quick learner and would do her best. She also said she had known Dr. Luan for 10 years and was his ping pong coach. The last time Zat saw son Hanli was about a month and a half before the incident, when he came looking for Dr. Lucien, who was not present that day. 3 days later, after finishing his last patient appointment, Dr. Luan announced he was closing early because he had received death threats via text message. He appeared anxious and personally checked all the doors. He refused to go home, saying the clinic felt safer. Following the threat, Dr. Luan immediately went to China and arranged for other dentists to temporarily help at the clinic. He had returned from China only 2 weeks before the incident, on the day of the incident around noon. Dr. Luan suggested taking everyone out for lunch. There were 4 people in the clinic at the time: Zat, Dr. Lucien, Chining referred to by Zat as the boss's girlfriend number 1, and Christo referred to as the boss's girlfriend number 2. Since they all went out together, they took one car. Chun Haiying had a black Honda and Christo had a BMW 320. I registered under Dr. Lucian's name but used by her. According to Zat and other witnesses, the story continued as follows. Dr. Lucian drove to work that day in a rented Toyota Corolla. Among the 4, Zat's car, a black Nissan Rogue SUV, was the largest, so they all rode in Zat's car to a nearby Korean barbecue restaurant after lunch around 1 p.m. They returned to the parking lot outside the clinic. Dr. Luan sat in the front passenger seat, seeing 2 patients standing at the building entrance. He quickly got out and started talking to a man named Azza. As they were exchanging a few words, a white Mercedes suddenly sped towards them, hitting Dr. Luan directly. While the police were interviewing witnesses, Officer McFinn approached the suspect. Son Hanli, at this point, Son Hai, was sitting by the curb, head down, with a vacant look in his eyes. McFinn asked if he was injured without lifting his head, son. Hongel replied, "Can you kill me? I don't want to live anymore. She deceived me and cheated on me with that man." Mexin asked, "So you deliberately ran into him?" Son Hanli responded, "Yes." When asked for the reason, Sunli didn't answer directly but kept repeating, "Kill me, I don't want to live, just shoot me." Seeing that Son Hanli was unwilling to talk further, Imakin left other officers to guard him and went to interview more witnesses at the scene. Meanwhile, another officer began questioning Chin Haiying. At this point, Chin Haiying was sitting on a red flower bed in the parking lot, wearing dark blue nurse scrubs with blood all over her left hand, both arms, her stomach, and her pants facing the officer's questions. Chin Haiying immediately revealed a shocking detail. The victim, Lucian, was not only her boss but also her boyfriend, and the attacker was her husband's son, H.A. Despite appearing upset while recounting the events, Chin Haiying's tone was remarkably calm, showing little emotional fluctuation as the rain began to fall. The officer continued the interrogation. Chun Haiying explained that she married son Hanli in 2003, and they had an 8-year-old son. She stated that she and Dr. Luxen began their affair while working together in January 2014. By September, son Hanli discovered her infidelity, and the couple started sleeping SE separately in October. They filed for divorce, and Chun Haiying moved out. Since Dr. Lucian was already married, she couldn't move in with him, and instead stayed with him temporarily at a hotel in Lake Forest. After 2 weeks at the hotel, Dr. Luan took her to China during Thanksgiving in November. Chun Haiying flew back to Irvine to spend the holiday with her son. This brief visit rekindled a sense of family between her and son Hanli. Chun Hang recounted that after Thanksgiving she returned to China to meet Lewin and officially ended their relationship on January 22nd of this year. She returned to the U.S. alone, reconciled with son Hanli, and resumed living with her husband and son. The family even vacationed in Hawaii together, enjoying their time. Chin Hang noted that although she had broken up with Lewin, they kept in touch via WeChat for months later. In May 2015, Lewin returned to the U.S., staying for just 3 weeks before heading back to China. During those 3 weeks, he was extremely busy. Luan invited Chan Hang to his hotel to talk, and she agreed, rekindling their relationship. Poor son Hanli thought his family had been mended and his wife had returned to him, but it was all a deception. When son Hanli discovered his wife's renewed infidelity, he gave Chun Hang an ultimatum: stay with him and their son, or leave for Lushan. Chun Hang chose to stay with her husband when asked about the weapon. Chining said that son Hanli had bought the knife in May 2015. 2 months before the incident at that time, son Hanli claimed he bought the knife for hunting, but according to Chun Hang, he had never gone hunting in all their years together. Strangely, just a day or two after buying the knife, son Hongel also purchased a small safe to store it. The knife was about 10 inches long and could not be folded. Chin Hang described that around 1 p.m. On the day of the incident, after lunch at the Korean barbecue restaurant, the group returned to the parking lot. Lushan quickly walked towards the main entrance to speak with a patient. As she crossed the parking lot, a white Mercedes slowly approached from the east and stopped beside her. Chun Hang was startled to see her husband's son Hanli staring at her with a menacing look. Before she could approach to speak with him, he stepped on the gas, accelerating straight into Lewin, throwing him a considerable distance. As Lewin tried to get up from the bushes, son Hungi rushed at him with a knife in hand. Chun Hang said she immediately ran over, standing between Lewin and son Hanli, trying to grab son Hung's right hand that held the knife, but couldn't stop him. At this point, several bystanders rushed to help and eventually pulled son Hanli away. Seeing Lewin on the ground, Chining, using her nursing skills, immediately began performing CPR after the police took over. She ran to son Hanli, asking why he did this. Son Hanli replied that it was too late and asked her to take care of their son and his parents. In another corner of the scene, Christo, a clinic employee, was sitting against a wall, clearly still in shock from the horrifying event. Medical staff and police noticed dried blood around her nose, mouth, and hands. She had no visible injuries except a knife wound on her left calf to ensure she received timely treatment. Paramedics took Christo to a nearby hospital in Irvine at 3:55 p.m. Officer James Wood arrived at the hospital to question Christo. The doctor informed him that Christo had been crying and screaming hysterically in the ambulance, but had since calmed down. Her left leg had a stab wound, but fortunately it didn't damage any bones, so she would be discharged. Soon Christo told the police that she came to the U.S. in 1999 and became an American citizen in 2005. At that time, she worked at the Los Angeles Table Tennis Association as a coach, well-liked by many students. Also in 2005, she met and fell deeply in love with Dr. Lewin at the table tennis courts. Even though she knew Lushan was married, she was willing to be the other woman and secretly continued their relationship. In 2013, Christo became pregnant and flew back to her hometown in Hunan, China to give birth in February 2014. Christo and Lushan's daughter Kimi was born. During this period, Lushan also spent time in China, as he had opened several pediatric dental clinics there, though she heard that his business wasn't doing well and was constantly losing money. Lewin was looking for sponsors and investors in China while also visiting Christo and their daughter in Hunan. Christo mentioned that she knew Lewin had a new lover and was still secretly meeting with Chin Howing when asked if she felt angry or jealous. Christo replied no, saying she had a child with Lewin and could only follow his wishes. She added that Lewin referred to both her and Chin Howing as his wives. Christo said she returned to the U.S. 3 months before the incident. As soon as she came back, Lushan arranged for her to work at his dental clinic. She hoped to bring her daughter to the U.S. and had booked a flight for July 26th, just 8 days later. Unfortunately, the tragedy happened today. She recounted that when she saw Sun Hanli repeatedly attacking Lucienne in the parking lot, she and Chun Hang ran to intervene during the struggle. She was stabbed in the leg, but she believes Sun Hanli didn't intentionally target her and probably accidentally stabbed her while trying to stab Luan, who was on the ground. After the interrogation, Lucian's second daughter, Lily, arrived at the hospital and took Christo home around 6 p.m. Lily drove Christo back to the scene to retrieve her BMW 320. However, the police informed them they had a search warrant and needed to examine the car. First, during their conversation, Lily mentioned she was at home near the University of California, Irvine, when she received calls from both her mother and Christo about her father being stabbed. Lily said that 8 years ago, when she was 14, she knew about her father's affair with Christo, but had no idea they had a child together. Lily shared that 2 months ago in May 2015, her father returned home and played a recording on his iPhone. It was a voice message from Sun Hanli sent via WeChat, threatening to bring a gun to the clinic to confront Luan. The recording also captured Chun Hang. Crying in the background, Lily said both she and her father were very worried about the message but didn't report it to the police to be cautious. Lucien returned to China in May. He came back to Irvine on June 18th to attend a court hearing related to a patient financial lawsuit. When asked if she knew that Chun Hang was also her father's lover, Lily seemed surprised and said she didn't. She explained that Chun Hang previously worked at her mother's clinic, Dr. Junlei Jia, which was in the same clinic but in a different room. After her parents divorced, Chin Hang started working for her father. When asked if her father had any other enemies, besides Sun Homi, Lily mentioned that her father had expressed concerns about a man named Mr. Chong. Luan had said that Mr. Chong hated him and might harm him, but Lily was unsure of the reasons. Meanwhile, the suspect's son, Hanli, had been taken to the police station. He began his interrogation at 5:54 p.m. Son Hanli explained that he and his wife had been married for 12 years and had an 8-year-old son named David. The family had lived in Irvine for over 5 years before the incident. Chin Hyang's parents had flown in from China to help care for their grandson, despite living in the same house. Son Hanli said he felt awkward because everyone knew about his wife's affair. The couple had been sleeping in separate rooms for a long time. Son Hanli recounted that he used to trust his wife, but in September of the previous year, he found a traffic ticket in their mailbox. It recorded Chun Hang running a red light in the morning a few days earlier with a photo from a traffic camera. Son Hanli noticed the incident occurred near Santa, which was not on Chin Hang's usual route to work. After checking the map, he was surprised to find many hotels around that area. What was more shocking was that through a private investigator, he discovered that his wife was meeting Luan almost daily to rent a room, feeling deeply betrayed. Sun Hanli confronted Chen Haoing, who admitted to the affair and said she wanted to return to China, with Luan leaving Sun Hanli to calm down alone on September 16, 2014. After Chun In moved out, Sun Hung filed for divorce to manage daily childcare. He had to bring his parents from Shandong to help. However, things took a turn after 2 months in November 2014. Chen Haoing flew back to the U.S. from China to spend a joyful Thanksgiving with their son. At this time, she revealed a secret. Initially, her relationship with Lucian was just flirtatious without any physical involvement, but one day Lucian drugged her, making her unconscious, and took many nude photos of her, which he kept on his computer. Lucian then showed her great care and concern, which led her to decide to be with him. However, while in China, Chin Hang discovered she had cancer and that her treatment was ineffective. She believed Luan's multiple affairs had exposed her to something that caused her illness. Sun Hanli was shocked, believing that Lucian had caused his wife's cancer. He urged Chun Hang to return to their family, and she agreed. However, she was worried about her green card status, fearing that leaving Lucian's clinic would result in losing her U.S. health insurance and facing significant debt. Sun Hanli reassured her that they could remar to solve the green card issue and that he would help her find a new job, making it unnecessary to work at Lucian's clinic. In January 2015, after Chan Hang returned to the U.S., Sun Hanli hired a lawyer to withdraw the divorce petition. Records show that on April 24, 2015, 3 months before the In incident, Sun Hanli and Chan Hing officially remarried. Facing police interrogation, Sun Hanli stated that after remarrying, he quickly realized his wife was still deceiving him. Outwardly, Shenang had found a new job in Newport Beach, but she continued her secret relationship with Lewin. He said that by then, Lucien's clinic was struggling financially, so Chunhang left him to return to Sun Homely. She not only wanted a green card, but also full custody of their son and their home in Irvine upon discovering his wife's ongoing secret meetings with Lewin. Sun Hanli repeatedly told Chining that he wanted to kill Lewin when the police asked if he also wanted to kill Chin Hang's son. Hanli immediately responded, "I could never harm my wife." He said he still had feelings for her and hoped they could reconcile, but he harbored deep hatred for Luan alone. Sun Hanli recounted that this morning Chen Howing said she was going to work, but he was suspicious because she had just found this new job, and it seemed unlikely she would be working overtime on a Saturday so soon. So he quietly drove to Lucian's clinic in the parking lot. He saw Chun Hong's Honda angrily. He stormed into the building to confront his wife, but found the clinic door closed with a note on it. Recognizing Chin Hong's handwriting, he turned back to his car and waited in the parking lot when he saw Lucien and his wife getting out of a car together. Rage and hatred consumed him. Initially, he intended to talk to them, but everything became a blur in his mind. According to Sun Hanli and other witnesses, the story continued as follows. Initially, Sun Hanli planned to confront Chining and Lewin, but in his fury, he stepped on the gas and rammed into Lewin, sending him flying. He then grabbed the knife he had prepared in the car and charged at Lucien. At this point, we have heard the testimonies of most people involved in the case. However, there is one more person, although not present at the scene, whose testimony could help us understand the whole story better. 2 days after the incident on July the 20th, the police interviewed Dr. Jun Leja, the victim's wife, to gather more information. Dr. John Leja, born in 1964, was 4 years younger than her husband Lewin. She graduated from Sichuan University a few years behind Lewin, but they studied different majors. One pursued dentistry and the other internal medicine. They married in 1988. Their first daughter, Janice, was born in 1991, their second daughter, Lily, in 1993, and their youngest son, Jack, in 2002, seeking better opportunities. The couple immigrated to the U.S. during their time in the U.S. Lewin completed a master's degree at the University of California, San Francisco, and a doctorate in dentistry at the University of California, Los Angeles. Meanwhile, Jun Leah earned 2 doctorates in medicine and molecular biology at UCLA. In 2005, Dr. Jun Lejaya opened her own cosmetic and anti-aging clinic in Irvine. In 2009, she was featured in a special interview on Phoenix TV discussing anti-aging issues on the Daily Topic program when asked about her personal life. Dr. Jun Leja revealed that she had long known about her husband's infidelity. She knew Lucian had an ongoing affair with Christo, a table tennis coach, but she didn't want to divorce him for the sake of their children's upbringing. In September 2014, she received a call from Sun Hanli, who wanted to arrange a meeting. They met at a public pool in their residential area. Sun Hanli bluntly stated that he had hired a private detective and confirmed that Dr. Jun Leja's husband Lewin and his wife Chining were having an affair. He also discovered that Lewin and another mistress, Christo, had a child in China who was 17 months old. After this meeting, Dr. Juna said she was utterly disillusioned with Lewin. She had always known Lewin had affairs with many women, but had never caught him with concrete evidence, or perhaps didn't want to find it now, with Sun Honli revealing everything she felt it was time to divorce after the meeting. Dr. Yan Leah immediately called Lewin, who was in China, and informed him of her decision to divorce. Lewin simply responded with, "Okay," when asked about Mr. Chong, whom Lily had mentioned as a potential threat. Dr. Junli Jia explained that Mr. Chong and Lewin had a financial dispute. Mr. Chong had paid $140,000 to Lewin to paint an office building, but Lewin didn't keep his promise, took the money, and found various excuses to delay the work. Dr. Jun Leah said that Mr. Chong was a good man and wouldn't harm Lucien on the afternoon of July 20th. Investigators went to Western Digital, where Sun Hanli worked to question his direct manager, Mr. Chun, about Sun Hai's behavior. Before the incident, Mr. Chin stated that Sun Hanli had joined the company in February. 2008, both had studied in Singapore, so they had many common topics to discuss. and got along well. He described Sun Hanli as friendly and calm, who never quarreled with anyone. Sun Hanli was hardworking, dedicated to his job, and one of the best employees under his supervision. A year before the incident in July 2014, Mr. Chin personally wrote a recommendation letter proposing Sun Hanli for a promotion. Sun Hanli was then promoted to the position of chief engineer when asked about Sun H. Longley's personal life. Mr. Chin mentioned that in September of the previous year, Sun Hanli confided that his wife was having an affair with a dentist and had left to live with him, abandoning their child to take care of his son. Sun Hanli had to bring his parents from China to help. Sun Hanli had tears in his eyes. While recounting this, Mr. Chin explained that according to company procedures, he would have one-on-one meetings with employees every 2 weeks to review progress reports. The last time he met with Sun Hanli was 3 days before the incident on July 15th. At that time, Sun Hanli appeared completely normal in the work log Mr. Chun had rated. Sun H. Longley's performance as excellent. Overall, Sun Hanli had a bright future, but since moving to the U.S., he had faced many personal challenges, ultimately leading to an irreparable mistake. 5 years after the incident in September 2020, this sensational case among the Chinese community in the U.S. finally went to trial at the trial. During over 4 hours of cross-examination, Sun Hanli detailed the complex relationship between himself, his wife chining the victim Lewin, and the table tennis coach Christo. He admitted to having threatened to kill Lewin multiple times before the incident, expressing sentiments like he should die and he deserves to die. However, he defended himself by claiming that he did not intend to kill Lewin. When he drove to the clinic that day, he only wanted to talk to Chin Hang and ask why she kept deceiving him. But when he saw Chun Hang in the parking lot, he lost control of his emotions and acted impulsively. His lawyer argued that Sun Hanli was blinded by rage at that moment and should be convicted of manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. In response, the prosecution presented 160 pages of WeChat messages showing that Sun Hanli had premeditated the act for a long time. The messages revealed that Sun Hanli had repeatedly expressed his intention to kill Lewin a month before the incident. He had bought the murder weapon at a Big Five sporting goods store and stored it in a safe on the day of the incident. Patient Aza saw Sun Hanli arrive at the clinic. There was a note on the door that Sun Hanli recognized as written by his wife Chin Hang. After discovering this, Sun Hanli did not leave but waited patiently for Lewin to return to exact his revenge. All these factors indicated premeditated murder. Sun Hanli's lawyer argued that the WeChat messages between Sun Hanli and Chun Hing suggested that the knife was meant to protect Chin Hang. Sun Hanli had exposed the affair between Lucian and Chin Hang to Lucian's wife. The lawyer also claimed that Lucian's wife had connections with some gang members who had used nude photos of Chun Hang to threaten her son. Hanli bought the knife out of fear that his wife would be retaliated against. While this seemed plausible, the jury deliberated for just 1 day before unanimously concluding that Sun Hanli was guilty of first-degree murder. The judge ultimately sentenced him to 26 years in prison after the initial verdict. Sun Hanli appealed on March the 29th, 2012. The Orange County Supreme Court rejected his appeal and upheld the original sentence. The earliest he could apply for parole would be in 2041, at that time at the age of 64. If he exhibited good behavior, he might still be released and live a peaceful second half of his life. In this love triangle case in Irvine, no one emerged victorious, although people often say, respect the dead. The victim Lucian was indeed. Always known, Lewin had affairs with many women but had never caught him with concrete evidence, or perhaps didn't want to find it now, with Sun Hanli revealing everything she felt it was time to divorce after the meeting. Dr. Yan Lia immediately called Lewin, who was in China, and informed him of her decision to divorce. Lewin simply responded with, okay, when asked about Mr. Chong, whom Lily had mentioned as a potential threat. Dr. Junli Jia explained that Mr. Chong and Lewin had a financial dispute. Mr. Chong had paid $140,000 to Lewin to paint an office building, but Lewin didn't keep his promise, took the money, and found various excuses to delay the work. Dr. Jun Lia said that Mr. Chong was a good man and wouldn't harm Lucien on the afternoon of July 20th. Investigators went to Western Digital, where Sun Hanli worked, to question his direct manager, Mr. Chun, about Sun Hai's behavior. Before the incident, Mr. Chin stated that Sun Hanli had joined the company in February 2008. Both had studied in Singapore, so they had many common topics to discuss and got along well. He described Sun Hanli as friendly and calm, who never quarreled with anyone. Sun Hanli was hardworking, dedicated to his job, and one of the best employees under his supervision. A year before the incident in July 2014, Mr. Chin personally wrote a recommendation letter proposing Sun Hanli for a promotion. Sun Hanli was then promoted to the position of chief engineer. When asked about Sun H. Longley's personal life, Mr. Chin mentioned that in September of the previous year, Sun Hanli confided that his wife was having an affair with a dentist and had left to live with him, abandoning their child to take care of his son. Sun Hanli had to bring his parents from China to help. Sun Hanli had tears in his eyes. While recounting this, Mr. Chin explained that according to company procedures, he would have one-on-one meetings with employees every 2 weeks to review progress reports. The last time he met with Sun Hanli was 3 days before the incident on July 15th. At that time, Sun Hanli appeared completely normal in the work log Mr. Chun had rated Sun H. Longley's performance as excellent. Overall, Sun Hanli had a bright future, but since moving to the U.S., he had faced many personal challenges, ultimately leading to an irreparable mistake. 5 years after the incident in September 2020, this sensational case among the Chinese community in the U.S. finally went to trial. At the trial, during over 4 hours of cross-examination, Sun Hanli detailed the complex relationship between himself, his wife Chining, the victim Lewin, and the table tennis coach Christo. He admitted to having threatened to kill Lewin multiple times before the incident, expressing sentiments like he should die and he deserves to die. However, he defended himself by claiming that he did not intend to kill Lewin. When he drove to the clinic that day, he only wanted to talk to Chin Hang and ask why she kept deceiving him. But when he saw Chun Hang in the parking lot, he lost control of his emotions and acted impulsively. His lawyer argued that Sun Hanli was blinded by rage at that moment and should be convicted of manslaughter rather than first-degree murder. In response, the prosecution presented 160 pages of WeChat messages showing that Sun Hanli had premeditated the act for a long time. The messages revealed that Sun Hanli had repeatedly expressed his intention to kill Lewin a month before the incident. He had bought the murder weapon at a Big Five sporting goods store and stored it in a safe on the day of the incident. Patient Aza saw Sun Hanli arrive at the clinic. There was a note on the door that Sun Hanli recognized as written by his wife Chin Hang. After discovering this, Sun Hanli did not leave but waited patiently for Lewin to return to exact his revenge. All these factors indicated premeditated murder. Sun Hanli's lawyer argued that the WeChat messages between Sun Hanli and Chun Hing suggested that the knife was meant to protect Chin Hang. Sun Hanli had exposed the affair between Lucian and Chin Hang to Lucian's wife. The lawyer also claimed that Lucian's wife had connections with some gang members who had used nude photos of Chun Hang to threaten her son. Hanli bought the knife out of fear that his wife would be retaliated against. While this seemed plausible, the jury deliberated for just 1 day before unanimously concluding that Sun Hanli was guilty of first-degree murder. The judge ultimately sentenced him to 26 years in prison after the initial verdict. Sun Hanli appealed on March the 29th, 2012. The Orange County Supreme Court rejected his appeal and upheld the original sentence. The earliest he could apply for parole would be in 2041, at that time at the age of 64. If he exhibited good behavior, he might still be released and live a peaceful second half of his life. In this love triangle case in Irvine, no one emerged victorious, although people often say, respect the dead. The victim, Lucian. Hello everyone, I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Get comfortable and relax. I remember the first time I walked through that alley at night. I had just finished a long shift at work and I felt drained. My back hurt from sitting in front of a computer all day and my eyes were tired from staring at the screen. I wanted to get home as fast as possible. The alley seemed like a shortcut that would shave 5 minutes off my commute. It looked harmless during the day, just a narrow path between two brick walls with a few trash cans on one side, but at night something about it felt off. I heard a faint sound like a whisper. I stopped and listened. It sounded like my name, barely audible. I shined my phone's flat flashlight down the alley, but I didn't see anything. I felt a slight chill run down my spine. I told myself it was the wind, or maybe a cat. I walked home trying to ignore the shaky feeling in my legs the next day. I used the same alley around noon. There was nothing strange about it. Then I heard cars passing by on the nearby street. I saw a piece of cardboard leaning against the wall. There was a mild odor of garbage, but it wasn't overwhelming. The alley felt boring and ordinary. I even wondered if I had imagined the whisper. I shrugged it off and headed to work that night. I finished late again. I had an option to take a longer route, but I felt stubborn. I didn't believe in ghost stories or anything like that, so I walked toward the alley. Once I got there, I paused for a second. The streetlights around that area were dim, but they worked well enough to show me the entrance. The alley was dark, so I turned on my phone's flashlight. At first it was quiet. My footsteps echoed off the walls. Then, about halfway through, I heard the whisper again. It sounded like my name drawn out in a low tone. I tried to focus on where it came from. The sound seemed to bounce off the brick walls, making it impossible to pinpoint. I felt my breathing speed up. My hands got sweaty, and I tried to hold the phone steady. I scanned from left to right. Nobody was there. I felt my heart pounding. I mumbled hello, but didn't get a reply. I swallowed hard, then forced myself to keep walking. When I reached the other side, I looked back. The whisper had stopped for the rest of that week. I tried to ignore the alley, but it was too convenient to pass up. It cut a chunk of time off my walk home, and I hated long detours every night. Though the same thing happened, I would get to the alley, turn on my flashlight, and start walking a few steps in. I'd hear it my name in that same hushed, drawn-out voice. The alley was never fully dark because my phone's light bounced around the walls, but I couldn't see anyone. Sometimes I thought I saw a shadow shift, but I wasn't sure if it was my imagination. I'd stop to listen. I'd hold my breath, hoping to catch a clearer sound. All I ever heard was the whisper. I tried calling out again and again. No one ever answered me. I started to feel tense. Every time I came home at night, I'd feel my stomach tighten as I approached the alley. My shoulders would bunch up, my palms would get clammy, even my throat felt dry. I told myself it was just some weird trick of acoustics or an echo. But the tension didn't go away one evening. I decided to record it. I didn't have fancy equipment. Just my phone, but I wanted proof that I wasn't losing my mind. I waited until it was late, probably around 11 p.m. When there weren't many people on the street, I turned on the camera and started recording before I stepped into the alley. My heart was already beating faster than normal. I tried to keep my breathing steady, but my chest felt tight as I walked. I held the phone out in front of me, shining the flashlight with one hand and recording video with the other. The night air felt cold on my face, and my ears picked up every little sound. The hum of a distant car engine, the shuffle of a PL plastic bag on the ground, and then that soft voice. It whispered my name again. My skin broke out in goosebumps. I pointed my phone in the direction of the sound. I saw brick walls, some graffiti, and a bit of broken glass near the corner. No movement, no person. I stood still for about 30 seconds trying to catch more audio. The whisper came again, a little louder, but I still couldn't see anyone. My legs wanted to run, but I forced myself to stay. Stan, my mind was racing. I thought if someone's messing with me, they'd show themselves by now, but no one did. After a few more seconds, I hurried out of there. When I got to my apartment, I locked the door and immediately played back the video. I watched every second, turning up the volume to catch every detail. The whisper wasn't there. The sound that had creeped me out so much didn't show up at all in the recording. All I heard was my own breathing and the slight shuffle of my footsteps on the pavement. That realization made me feel uneasy. I sat on my couch, phone in hand, replaying the video. My mouth went dry and I felt my hand shake a bit. I couldn't understand why I heard something that the phone didn't pick up. I tried to see if maybe my finger had covered the microphone or if there was some glitch in the recording. Nothing seemed wrong. The audio was clear, just missing the whisper. I couldn't sleep well that night. I'd lie in bed and think about whether I was hallucinating or if there was some kind of trick happening. I woke up feeling groggy and tense the next night. I tried the alley again. I don't know why, maybe I felt a weird need to confront it. My heart rate spiked as I stood at the entrance. I felt a tightness in my chest like I was about to do something dangerous. The lights around me flickered for a moment, which made me jump. I steadied myself, inhaled and stepped in my footsteps, echoed my flashlight, illuminated the ground and part of the wall. I kept my eyes peeled for any sign of movement. I heard my name again, but it was faint. It came from behind me. I whipped around, shining the light at the bricks and trash cans. Nothing. I gritted my teeth and walked deeper into the alley. The voice came again, this time from my left side. I turned quickly, scanning the area. Still nothing. My breathing got rough. My throat felt tight and my hands shook a bit. The smell of damp concrete filled my nostrils. My heart pounded so hard I thought I could feel my pulse in my temples. Then the voice came from right in front of me, closer than ever. I took a step back. My skin felt cold and my mouth went dry. I raised my phone chin, shining the flashlight at eye level. Nobody was there. I heard nothing else, so I sprinted the rest of the way. I felt my muscles burn as I reached the main street. My chest heaved and I had to bend over to catch my breath. At this point, I was really disturbed. I started questioning everything about that alley. Maybe it was some kind of elaborate prank, but who would bother doing that every single night? Maybe there was a hidden speaker in the wall. That idea sounded silly, but I couldn't rule it out. I thought about telling someone at work, but I worried they'd think I was paranoid, so I kept it to myself. I just avoided the alley for a few days, taking the longer route home. That route was well lit and busy, so I felt safer, but I also felt frustrated. I didn't like feeling intimidated by a random piece of my neighborhood. After a while, I decided I'd go back and check the alley in daylight, then again at night to see if I could figure out what was happening on Saturday afternoon. I walked over there. The sun was bright. I saw some scattered trash on the ground. There was a broken bottle near a drain and a stack of empty boxes leaning against the left wall. The graffiti looked old. One section said something in big black letters, but I couldn't read the text clearly because it had been painted over by someone else. I walked the length of the alley, tapping on the walls to see if they were hollow. They felt solid. I didn't hear any strange echoes or whispers. It all seemed normal and mundane. I even stood there for a few minutes waiting, but nothing unusual happened. I left feeling a bit annoyed. That same night, I decided to pass through the alley again just to test. It was around 10 p.m. There weren't many people on the street, but a few cars drove by. I approached the alley and the hairs on my arm stood up immediately. The alley was dark except for a faint glow from a distant streetlight. I stepped inside, phone in hand, flashlight ready. The air felt colder than usual. My footsteps sounded louder. I walked slowly, scanning the walls, then I heard my name in that same faint whisper. My heart thumped against my ribcage. I clenched my jaw and kept walking, trying to pinpoint the source. The whisper came again. It sounded like it was right beside my ear. I felt a chill spread through my arms. I looked around, turning in a full circle. Nothing but bricks, trash cans, and a few old boxes. My forehead broke out in sweat. Even though the air felt cool, my pulse hammered in my ears. I kept moving forward. Each step felt heavy. Then I heard a soft shuffle behind me. I spun around, flashlight aimed. I saw a flicker of movement near the stack of boxes. I shouted, "Who's there?" My voice echoed off the walls. The shuffle stopped. I inched closer. My heart was racing. I heard my name whispered again, right behind me. I turned so fast, my phone almost slipped out of my hand. I aimed the light, but saw only the alley entrance. My breath came in quick bursts. My throat felt tight. I backed away, keeping the flashlight pointed in front of me. I heard no more whispers, so I walked faster toward the other side. Once I reached the street, I broke into a jog all the way home. When I got inside my apartment, I locked the door and sank onto the couch. My hands were shaking, my legs felt weak. I wiped the sweat off my forehead. I stared at the floor for a good 10 minutes, just trying to calm down. I thought about calling the police, but what would I report that I heard whispers calling my name in an empty alley? They'd probably ask if I was feeling well or if I'd had anything to drink. I didn't want that. So I sat there feeling my pulse gradually slow down. My mind was full of questions, but I had no idea how to answer them. All I knew was that alley wasn't normal at night. It felt like something was there, hidden in the dark, calling to me over the next few days. I stayed away from the alley. I took the longer route. Even if it meant wasting extra time, I still felt uneasy. My sleep wasn't great. Sometimes I'd toss and turn, hearing that whisper in my mind, but at least I didn't have to experience it in person. After about a week, I tried walking by the alley entrance without going in. I looked down it for a few seconds. It was evening and the light was starting to fade. Nothing looked out of place. I didn't hear anything. I shook my head and kept walking down the regular path. I still don't have a solid explanation for what's happening in that alley. I've never seen any person hiding in there. I haven't found any speaker or device that could create that sound. But I know what I heard. It was real to me. For now, I stay away at night. I'd rather lose a few minutes on my commute than deal with that strange whisper again. I still think about it sometimes, sitting alone in my apartment or walking around my neighborhood. It's an unsettling feeling, knowing there's a spot near my own building where something unknown calls my name. I can't fully describe the fear it causes. It's not a monster or anything I can see, but something I can't explain. That's enough to keep me out of that alley once the sun goes down. I woke up that night drenched in sweat. My throat felt tight and my arms tingled with some kind of nervous energy. I had no reason to be awake at that hour, but I couldn't push away the sudden urge to check my garage. It made no sense. I live alone and I'm usually a heavy sleeper, but something was pulling me out of bed with a force I couldn't ignore. I sat up, grabbed a pair of sweatpants off the floor, and slipped on some old sneakers. I didn't bother with a shirt. The air felt cold against my chest, but I barely noticed. My only thought was that I needed to see what was going on in the garage. I walked down the hallway with slow steps, trying not to make noise. My heart thudded in my chest. I could hear the floor creak under my feet. The house was dark except for a little light from a street lamp creeping in through the windows. My ears felt sharp, like they were on high alert for any small sound. I reached the door that led to the garage and stood there for a second hand on the doorknob. I could feel my pulse in my fingers. I told myself I was just acting paranoid, but I couldn't shake off the feeling that something was waiting on the other side. I finally turned the knob and stepped into the garage. It smelled like motor oil and damp concrete. The overhead light switch was next to the door, so I reached out and flicked it on. The light flickered once before it settled. I scanned the place. Not sure what I expected to see. My car sat in its usual spot. A little dusty, the workbench along the sidewall looked normal. Tools where I had left them, a few empty soda cans on top. Nothing seemed out of place at first glance. Then I saw the footprints. They were wet, dark tracks across the garage floor. They formed a trail that started near the garage's side door. That door is usually locked, and I almost never open it. The footprints moved in a direct line toward the driver's door of my car. Then they stopped just like that. There was no turning around, no continuation to the passenger side, and no exit path. It was like whoever left them had vanished into thin air. I stood there staring at those footprints, my mouth going dry. I felt my shoulders tense up my gut, twisted the hairs on my arms. Rose, I took a few steps closer, bending down to look at the tracks. They were shaped like bare feet, slightly larger than mine. There were toes and a clear heel. Mark each print was about half a step apart, as if someone had walked slowly or carefully. The wetness on the floor still glistened under the light. I could smell a faint hint of damp earth, but I couldn't place where it came from. I looked around, checking every corner of the garage, behind the car, under the workbench, near the tool cabinet. I didn't see anybody, but I couldn't ignore the thick tension in the air. It felt like I wasn't alone. My body reacted as if someone was staring at me from a dark corner. My breathing was shallow, and I could hear my own heartbeat. I kept telling myself to stay calm. I decided to check the garage's side door. I walked around the car, stepping carefully on the concrete floor. My footsteps echoed in the silence when I reached the door. I tested the handle. It was locked. I jiggled it a few times. It didn't budge. I crouched down and noticed the door frame looked untouched. No scratches, no signs of forced entry. I stood up again and tried to piece this together. If the footprints started here, how did someone enter without breaking the lock? I turned back toward the car. The footprints were still there, leading from this door to the driver's side and then stopping. I walked over to the car and peered inside through the window. The seats were empty, nothing on the floor mats. I tried the door handle. It was locked. I went around the car, checking the other doors all locked. I could see a thin layer of dust on the hood. If someone had touched the car recently, I would have seen smudges or streaks. There were none. My nerves were on edge. My mind kept racing with possibilities. Could it be some prank? Did a neighbor slip in here, somehow leave these prints, and then slip out? But how the only other way out of the garage would be through the main garage door, and I always make sure it's shut tight. I looked up at the garage door. It was closed, just as I'd left it. I walked over and tried to lift it a few inches. It didn't move. Move? I confirmed the lock was still in place. I listened for any sounds, breathing, shuffling, anything. The only noises were the distant hum of a refrigerator motor in the house and a soft, barely noticeable buzz from the overhead light. I felt a knot in my stomach. My hands were shaking a bit. Though I tried to steady them, I walked around the garage again, opening the tool cabinet, pushing aside old boxes, moving a spare tire. I found nothing. Everything looked the same as always. I stepped back and stood by the workbench, leaning on it for a second. My palms felt sweaty. My breath was short. I stared at the footprints, trying to figure out what they meant. They were so clear, so fresh. There was no reason for there to be wet footprints in my locked garage. It felt impossible. I thought about calling the police, but I wasn't sure what I'd report. There was no actual break-in that I could prove no damage, no stolen items, just footprints that appeared out of nowhere. I also felt a bit embarrassed about the thought of calling 911 over footprints, so I pulled out my phone and looked at the time. It was around 3:30 in the morning. I had this tight feeling in my chest, like I couldn't relax. I decided to check my car's trunk just to be sure nobody was hiding inside. I pressed the button on my key fob to unlock the trunk. The click echoed in the quiet space. I opened the trunk and shone my phone's flashlight inside. Nothing out of the ordinary, just a spare tire, a small toolbox, and a folded blanket. No sign of anyone. I closed it. The slam of the trunk lid made me jump. A bit, my heart was still pounding. I made sure the car was locked again and walked back to the door that led into the house. My instincts told me to keep looking, but I felt uneasy staying in that garage any longer. I double-checked the garage interior. I flicked the light switch off, then on again, just to see if the sudden darkness might reveal something. Nothing changed. The footprints remained. They didn't fade or lead anywhere else. I felt watched, but I couldn't see any eyes on me. My shoulders were tight and my jaw hurt from clenching it. My mind kept screaming that there was something wrong. I turned off the light and stepped back into the house, locking the door behind me. The hallway felt cold against my skin. I stood there for a moment, hands still on the doorknob. My breathing was shallow and my head felt light. I wondered if I should grab a weapon just in case. I'm not big on guns, but I do keep a baseball bat under my bed. I walked back to my bedroom and opened the closet. I grabbed the bat and held it for a second, testing its weight in my hands. It felt comforting in a basic way, like at least I had something if there was an intruder. I went through the house, flipping on lights as I moved the living room, the kitchen, the small guest room. Everything looked normal. The doors and windows were locked. I didn't see any more footprints. I didn't find any open windows. I listened for floor creaks or any sign of movement. Silence. Eventually, I circled back to the kitchen. My throat was so dry that I poured myself a glass of water. I drank it in one long gulp, trying to calm my nerves. I felt shaky, but I told myself I couldn't just ignore this. If someone had been in my garage, they could still be around. Maybe they ran off when they heard me. Maybe they were hiding outside. The thought sent a cold wave through my body. I decided to check outside the house, even though it made me nervous. I grabbed my keys, unlocked my back door, and stepped onto the patio. It was dark, except for the faint glow of the streetlights on the other side of my fence. I held the bat in my right hand, keeping it close to my leg. The grass was a little wet, so my sneakers sank in slightly as I walked. I looked at the ground, trying to see if there were more footprints. I couldn't see any. The yard was still my air conditioning unit. Hummed quietly, I glanced around the fence line, shining my phone's flashlight. Nothing, no person lurking, no strange silhouettes, no movement. I felt a chill run down my arms, and I caught myself breathing fast. Entirely. Lord Morgia, an investigative journalist with access to the case, File gave a scoop on a TV show. She confirmed the line of investigation that authorities were pursuing after the arrest of Father Francisco, who was considered the main suspect in the deacon's death. The hypothesis involved extortion, but not due to passion. Instead, Leo had apparently uncovered several irregularities in the administration of parish resources based on the data in her possession. Lure reported that authorities had found compelling evidence pointing directly at the priest according to Mexican law. Investigators had between 3 and 24 months to gather all the evidence needed to prove their case and clarify the events as part of the important revelations. The journalist highlighted Leo's lifestyle, which seemed to involve expenses far exceeding those of an ordinary student, as Leo did not work and dedicated himself to his studies. He had no major income sources. Beyond monthly support of 10,000 pesos, about 600 tons from his mother, who passed away early in 2019. Ending that support, Leo was not known to have any employment, and his income from the church was not constant. However, the young man had made different trips to places like Miami in the United States, Aspen in Switzerland, and even the Middle East. Another curious fact was the vehicle he owned. How could it be explained that the deacon drove a new, expensive, and latest model car? He also had a state-of-the-art cell phone. Finally, there was no way to explain how Leo, a few days before his death, was able to rent a house near the parish for which he would have to pay about 6,000 pesos a month, approximately 350. In fact, the young man had invited his family to come and see the apartment, and they had planned to do so on Friday, June 14th, 2019. That meeting never happened because someone took his life. Lore also noted that Leo had significant amounts of cash and money in bank accounts, with several transfers that he received from Father Francisco. The more details were revealed, the more implicated the priest seemed in everything that had happened. However, he remained firm in his position of innocence and did not provide any real information about Leo's lifestyle again and again. Father Francisco claimed that he had nothing to do with the death of the young deacon father. Hugo Vemar, former spokesman for the Archdiocese of Mexico, confirmed the same to the media after visiting Father Francisco in prison. Father Hugo condemned the actions of the authorities, accusing them of manipulating the evidence. He assured the media that despite everything, Father Francisco remained calm and that the defense lawyers would present the respective proof of the priest's innocence. Jorge Cuadra said the priest's lawyers, Jorge Cuadra and Jorge Pinuno, also asserted the priest's innocence and questioned the investigation's development. In their opinion, the videos presented, which placed him with the victim at the scene of the crime, were not sufficient to hold him responsible for taking Leo's life. Just as the ecclesiastical representatives defended the priest vehemently, the community was on the same line of action. The demonstrations of support and solidarity from Gel Hidalgo's inhabitants for Father Francisco were unwavering. From the moment they learned of the priest's detention, the community maintained a steadfast attitude over the following months. An important group within the community insisted that the authorities had made a mistake, in that Fr. Francisco could not have committed such an abominable act. The parish priest's defenders did not limit themselves to prayers or demonstrations within the church. They took their discontent to the streets, leading to several protests. Community members called for Father Francisco's release with banners, cardboard, and clothing signs displaying messages of support for the priest. They insisted on his innocence and demanded his release. A large demonstration completely shut down the southern part of the busy Inez Avenue. They also gathered at the Cristo Salvador Catholic Church, where after praying, they loudly proclaimed the priest's innocence and demanded his release from the authorities. Public, the priest is innocent, the priest is innocent journalist. This is how Cristo Salvador parishioners protested during the demonstrations in favor of the priest's release. Community members also denounced the alleged excesses committed by the media. They accused the media of spreading false information about the case and sensationalizing it. Some individuals expressed their anger by threatening to physically harm and expel journalists from the parish more than a year after the terrible attack that resulted in Leo's death. The Avendano family reported that in early December 2020, the first hearing was held in the trial court in Orient Prison. There, Father Francisco was serving preventive detention as the main suspect in killing the young man in the early morning of June 12, 2019. Content to the streets leading to several protests. Community members called for Father Francisco's release with banners, cardboard, and clothing signs displaying messages of support for the priest. They insisted on that needed repair, but nothing unusual. The main house had chipped paint and a porch with old chairs that creaked in the breeze. I felt comfortable enough until I noticed a smaller structure at the far edge of the property. It sat behind a patch of tall grass and it seemed out of place. The walls were gray from weather damage and the door looked slightly warped. I asked Tom about that building. He shrugged and said, "That's an old shed. Nobody uses it anymore. My uncle built it years ago to store firewood, but it's empty now." He sounded casual and I didn't push the subject. He told me to settle in and said we could walk around later. He went back inside to make dinner. I stood on the porch for a minute staring at that shed. I wanted to see what was in there. I couldn't say why, it just pulled my attention after dropping my bag in the guest room. I walked across the yard. I passed by a few chickens pecking at the ground and saw the fence that separated the main property from the patch of grass. It wasn't a tall fence, so I climbed over it without much trouble. The grass almost reached my hips. It rustled when I moved. Each step created a low crunching sound. I looked back at the house. I didn't see Tom anywhere. When I got closer to the shed, I noticed there was a padlock on the door, but the latch was rusted. I tested it. It felt weak. I gave it a tug and the lock popped right off the latch. I felt a jolt in my stomach. The door creaked open and stale air drifted out. I leaned forward to look inside. The interior was dim, but I could see the outline of some crates stacked along the walls. The floor was uneven. The walls looked dry and splintered. I couldn't see anything moving in there, so I took a step inside. Dust hung in the air. I smelled something burnt. I aimed my phone's flashlight at the center of the floor. There was a circle of black ash with bits of partially burned wood. It was recent. I saw a faint curl of smoke rising from the pile. It couldn't have been more than an hour old. That made no sense to me because Tom had said nobody used the shed. I crouched down and touched the ashes with the tip of my boot. They were still warm. I stood up, feeling my heart beat a little faster. I heard a noise behind me. It was a soft creak on the floorboards near the entrance. I spun around holding my phone's light in that direction. There was no one there. The door was half open. The hinges groaned when a breeze pushed it. I felt a chill on my arms. I stepped over to the doorway and looked outside. The tall grass was still. I didn't see any movement. I scanned left and right. There was no sign of a person. I felt uneasy. My scalp tingled and I swallowed hard. I'm not the type to scare easily, but something about the silent yard made me feel cornered. There was no sound of birds or insects. The air felt heavy. I peered around the edge of the shed and saw only the outline of the house. In the distance, my phone vibrated in my hand and I almost jumped. It was Tom sending me a message that dinner would be ready. Soon I replied on my way and slipped my phone back into my pocket before I left. I took another look at the ashes. They looked like someone had been there recently. I didn't see footprints, but the floor was a rough plank surface, so footprints wouldn't be obvious. I brushed my hand against one of the crates in the corner. It felt empty, just a hollow sound when I tapped it. I didn't see any tools or personal items. Just that circle of ash. I decided to head back and ask Tom again about the shed. I climbed back over the fence and made my way to the main house. Tom was in the kitchen stirring a pot on the stove. I told him I went to look at the old shed. He gave me a curious look and asked if I saw anything interesting. I decided to be direct. I said there was a fresh fire in there. Any idea who might have started it? He stopped stirring, turned the burner off, and faced me. He scratched the back of his neck. He said he had no clue and that maybe a farmhand used it for warmth, but he admitted that nobody he knew had any reason to be in that shed. He even seemed a bit unsettled, but he shrugged it off and changed the subject to dinner. We ate in silence for a while. He served a simple meal of rice beans and some cooked meat. I kept thinking about that pile of ash. I asked him again about anyone else on the property. He said there were a couple of workers who came by during the day to feed the animals and maintain the fields, but they left before sundown. He had no reason to suspect them of starting a fire in a random shed. His voice was calm, but he avoided looking me in the eye after dinner. Tom went to his room saying he wanted to rest. I paced around the living room, glancing at the clock on the wall. It was around 9 p.m. The house felt too quiet. I decided to take another look at the shed, this time with a flashlight. I grabbed a heavy jacket, slipped on my boots, and headed outside. The air was cooler now and the sky was clear. The moon gave enough light for me to see the outline of the land, but I kept my flashlight pointed ahead. I took the same path, passing the chicken coop and climbing the fence. The grass rustled around my legs. I stepped carefully, listening for any movement. The shed stood in the darkness, with the door still slightly ajar. I pushed it open and shone my flashlight inside. The ashes were there, but now they looked disturbed. Someone had scattered them around. The pile wasn't as neat as before, and there were a few spots of dirt kicked into the center. My mouth went dry. I'd been gone for maybe 2 hours, and something had already changed. I walked in, scanning the corners with my flashlight. The crates were in the same place, but one of them was open. I stepped closer and saw that it was empty except for some straw. I heard a noise outside, like a twig snapping underfoot. I froze and turned off my flashlight. My heart pounded in my chest. I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. Then I heard another crack closer. This time I inched toward the door and peered outside. I saw movement near the fence. A figure ducked behind one of the fence posts. The shape looked like a full-grown adult. I couldn't see details, just a dark outline. My muscles tensed up. I stepped out of the shed, keeping my flashlight off. I slowly made my way across the grass, aiming for the fence on the other side of the property so I could loop around the grass, tugged at my pants, and each step felt like it made too much noise. I paused every few seconds, trying to catch any hint of movement. My ears strained. I heard my own heartbeat in my ears. Then I heard a swishing sound like someone pushing through tall grass. It came from my left, so I moved right. I tried not to breathe too loudly. I reached the fence and ducked behind an old trough that stood by some broken boards. My hands were shaking a bit. My throat felt tight. I stayed still for a moment, scanning the area. I saw the shape again, moving slowly across the yard, heading away from me. The figure was tall, wearing some kind of jacket or coat. I watched it slip through an opening in the fence near the back of the farm. It didn't make much noise, just a gentle rustle of grass. Then it disappeared. I waited another minute before turning on my flashlight. My mind raced with questions. Who was that person? Why were they in the shed? What was the purpose of that fire? I felt frustrated because Tom acted like he had no idea what was happening yet. There was someone sneaking around on his land. I worked my way back to the house, trying to stay quiet. I locked the door when I got inside. Tom's bedroom light was off, so either he was asleep or pretending to be. I considered waking him up, but I felt uncertain about how he'd react. Maybe he already knew something and didn't want to share it. I went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed, thinking my heart rate finally slowed down. Sleep didn't come easily. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to every creak of the house. I heard the wind push against the windows. I heard the distant cluck of a chicken around midnight. I thought I heard a faint scraping sound at the back door, but I might have imagined it. I got up and checked there was nothing there. The night dragged on, and I eventually do-toed off sometime after 2 in the morning. When I woke up, the sun was already high. Tom was in the kitchen making coffee. I joined him, and he casually asked if I had slept well. I told him about the person I saw in the yard. He frowned and said, "That was strange." I asked if we should call the authorities or at least confront the farmhands. He shrugged and said we could walk around the fence line to see if we could find any footprints. I agreed. We walked the perimeter of the property, checking for signs of trespassing. We found a section of the fence behind the shed that looked loose, like someone had pushed it aside. There were a few flattened spots in the grass, but nothing else. We didn't find any belongings or tools. We didn't see footprints in the dirt, just scattered patches of dry grass. The ground was hard from lack of rain, so it was difficult to see any impressions. I asked Tom if he had enemies or if anyone local had a grudge against his family. He shook his head and said everyone around was friendly. He insisted the person I saw might have been a lost hiker or maybe a neighbor's farmhand cutting through. It didn't sound convincing to me. I thought about the fresh ashes. It wasn't just someone passing by. They had made a fire, then scattered it. Later, Tom acted casual for the rest of the morning. We fed the chickens, checked the garden, and fixed a broken fence post. I tried to get more information from him about the shed, but he kept saying it was just an old storage space. I felt like he was hiding something. He kept changing the subject to other chores by midday. I was exhausted. My nerves were on edge from the night before. I sat on the porch drinking water and watched the path to the shed. The sun beat down on the yard, and everything looked ordinary, except I couldn't shake that feeling of Thought about calling someone, maybe the real or a friend, but I felt a strange pull, like I had to see it for myself first. So I hoisted myself up through the hole in the ceiling. My heart thumped against my ribs when my feet found solid flooring. I tried to steady my breathing. The air was stale, but it carried a faint smell. It wasn't mold or rot. It was more like old wood and a hint of something chemical, maybe varnish that never fully aired out. I swung the flashlight around dust SW world, making me cough. I walked slowly across the room, watching the floor for weak spots. My boots left clear tracks in the dust. I saw older footprints too, but they were hard to make out. They might have belonged to someone wearing smaller shoes, or maybe just a different tread. My shoulders felt tight. The idea that someone else had been up here more recently than the dust suggested made me uneasy. The furniture looked antique. There was an ornate wooden chair with carved legs, a coffee table with a glass top, and a heavy sofa with faded fabric. I ran my hand over the sofa's armrest. Dust clung to my fingers, but beneath the grime, the fabric felt surprisingly intact. I looked at the coffee table. A few old magazines lay there, their covers yellowed. The dates were from about 10 years ago. I picked one up, the pages stuck together a bit, but I could flip through. There were pictures of outdated electronics, no personal notes, no scribbles. It didn't tell me much. The tension in my chest grew stronger as I moved toward the desk in the corner. I placed the magazine back on the table and aimed the flashlight at the far side of the room. The desk was simple, with a single drawer. I heard a faint scraping sound when I stepped on a loose floorboard. My pulse quickened. I snapped my head around, shining the light behind me. Nothing moved. The only sound was my own breathing. I felt like I was being watched, even though I saw no one else there. My arms felt cold, even though I was sweating at the desk. I tried the drawer. It stuck, but a quick tug with both hands pulled it open inside. I found a few pens, a dried-up ink bottle, and some scraps of blank paper. No letters, no documents. I tapped the desk surface. It felt sturdy. The top had a few scratches and rings from cups or cans. Then I noticed something on the floor by my foot. It was a small thread of fabric, dark blue, wedged in a crack between the floorboards. It looked fresh, as if it had snagged off someone's clothing. My stomach lurched. The color wasn't faded. It was still bright, like it hadn't been there for long. I lifted my head and stared at the walls. They were made of plain wooden planks painted over in a dull off-white color. There was a single narrow window, but it was boarded up from the inside. I walked over and nudged the boards. They felt solid. There was no obvious way for someone to get in or out, not without prying them loose. First, my mind started racing, trying to figure out how someone could be in here recently, or why the furniture looked so used. My throat felt tight. I took a deep breath, but it didn't calm me. I walked around the perimeter of the room. My boots kicked up dust. I ran the flashlight beam over every surface, looking for any door or hatch. I saw nothing except the boarded window and the opening I'd come through. There was an old lamp in one corner, but no light bulb in it. The cord dangled uselessly. I tried to turn the lamp on out of habit, but of course nothing happened. There was a small trunk against the back wall. It had metal latches that looked rusted. I knelt in front of it. My knees creaked. I slipped my fingertips under one latch and tried to pop it open. It gave with a screech. The other latch was harder, but I managed to loosen it. Inside, there were a few blankets folded neatly. They smelled musty. I shook one out and coughed as dust filled the air beneath the blankets. I found some old clothes, button-down shirts, slacks. A sweater. All looked outdated, but they were neatly folded. I felt the fabric. It was stiff with age, but I didn't see any major discoloration or holes. Every looked preserved, but not completely abandoned. It unnerved me. Standing up, I looked around again, my mind buzzing with questions. Why hide a fully furnished room in the ceiling? Who maintained it? And what about the difference in measurements in the bedroom floor plan? I figured that was just part of the deception, a way to mask this extra space. My spine tingled whenever I thought about how recent some details felt. That single thread of fabric refused to leave my mind. I decided I'd had enough. My legs felt shaky, my lower back was tense. I started toward the opening I'd created. I pointed the flashlight at the ground so I wouldn't trip my own footprints in. The dust stood out, but every few feet I saw faint impressions of other footprints. They looked older, but not ancient. I tried to judge how big they were compared to mine. It was hard to tell in that low light, but they seemed narrower when I reached the gap. I switched off the flashlight and put it in my pocket. I climbed down slowly, feeling the edge of the cut ceiling pressing against my sides. Once I was back in the bedroom, I exhaled a long breath. I didn't realize I was holding. My heart still pounded. My fingers trembled a little. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall. Dust covered my clothes and I felt lightheaded. I stayed there for a minute, trying to process everything. The reality was simple. My new apartment had a hidden room complete with furniture, but the details made it more unsettling. The recent feel of the setup, the footprints, that piece of fabric. It all implied someone might have been using that space. I pictured someone creeping up there while the place was vacant, or maybe even during the open houses before the sale. I swallowed hard. My throat dry. Eventually, I forced myself to get up. I needed water, and I wanted to step outside. The closed windows and stale air made the bedroom feel suffocating. I walked out into the hallway. My shoes left dusty footprints on the clean floor. I wiped my face with my sleeve. My body felt clammy, and my stomach was in knots. I realized I had to decide what to do next. My first thought was to call the real estate agent, but I wasn't sure how to explain it without sounding paranoid. Part of me just wanted to seal that opening back up and forget about it, but the thought of leaving that hidden room unchecked made my skin crawl. I stepped into the kitchen and ran the tap. The water was cold and I gulped it down. The sensation grounded me a bit. I rested my hands on the counter and took a few slow breaths. I noticed my reflection in the microwave black door. My face looked pale. My eyes seemed a bit wide. I didn't recognize my own expression. I felt like I just lived through an unsettling moment that I couldn't shrug off. I wandered back toward the bedroom. The silence in the apartment pressed in on me. The corridor lights were still turned off and the day sunlight was fading. The shadows felt heavier. My mind started replaying every step I took up in that hidden space. I remembered the angle of the furniture, the thick dust, and the footprints that weren't mine. My lips felt dry. I licked them and tried to steady my breathing again. I stopped right in front of the bedroom room door. I stared at the ceiling where I'd cut away the panel. A faint draft came through the opening. It smelled old and stale. I shivered. The idea of sleeping beneath that space made me uneasy. My arms felt goosebumps rising. I turned on the bedroom light, but it didn't make me feel better. The hole in the ceiling cast an odd shadow across the floor. My phone buzzed in my pocket again, but I still ignored it. I couldn't focus on anything except that room above of me. Finally, I grabbed my tools and began the process of covering the opening. My hands trembled as I lifted the spare drywall pieces and tried to wedge them back in place. I kept glancing up, half expecting to see someone staring down at me, but I saw nothing. Just the dusty edges of the hidden room. Each time I heard the rustle of drywall or the scrape of a tool, my heart jumped. I felt an urgent need to close it off, at least temporarily. Once I had a rough patch in place, I stepped back and rubbed my neck. My shirt clung to my back with sweat. I still had so many questions, but I couldn't handle staying under that hidden space any longer. The tension in my body felt overwhelming. I decided I'd call a contractor friend the next morning and get a second opinion. I also planned to speak with the real estate agent, though I had no idea how that conversation would go for now. I just wanted to get out of the apartment. I needed fresh air, and I wanted to clear my head. As I walked to the front door, I couldn't shake the sensation that I wasn't alone. Every sound seemed magnified. My pulse raced. I kept looking over my shoulder. I clenched my fists a few times, trying to get the blood flowing. When I finally opened the door and stepped into the hallway of the building, relief washed over me. The air outside the apartment felt cooler and cleaner. I could breathe again without my lungs feeling trapped. I locked the door behind me. My mind was still spinning. but at least I was away from that hidden room for the moment. I stood there in the hallway, dust still clinging to my clothes, my hair probably a mess. I had no idea what I just stumbled into. I just knew I couldn't ignore it. My next steps would involve confronting the people who sold me this apartment, but first I needed to calm down. My heart was still pounding and my thoughts were tangled. I walked toward the elevator, my footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. I pressed the button. My body felt drained as I waited for the elevator doors to open. I caught myself glancing back at my apartment door. I felt that chill in my spine again. Then I looked away and forced myself to focus on the elevator display, counting down each floor. I just wanted to get out of there. The door slid open and I stepped inside. I tapped the button for the lobby when the doors closed. I finally let out a long, shaky breath. My pulse throbbed in my temples. I stared at the elevator walls and tried to settle my nerves one floor at a time. I noticed the glow from half a block away. It was late and all the other buildings on that street were dark. This one still had a faint flickering light in the corridor visible through the glass doors. It didn't make sense because every rumor I'd heard said this building got shut down years ago. No one should have been inside, but the emergency lights told a different story. I felt an urge to check it out, maybe find a switch or a breaker that someone forgot. A small part of me also wanted to satisfy my curiosity. It felt odd and I couldn't let it go. I walked up to the main door. The metal handle looked dusty. I placed my hand on it and pushed it stuck for a second, then gave way with a creak. My pulse kicked up a notch. I glanced over my shoulder, wondering if anyone was watching me from the street, but everything outside stayed silent and empty. I stepped inside and let the door close behind me. A dull thud echoed in the lobby. The entrance smelled like old cardboard and stale air. There was a reception desk to my left, but it was bare. A few scattered business cards were spread across the surface. The overhead light was out, so the only illumination came from the emergency lights in the hall. I didn't see any sign of movement, but I got a nagging feeling that I wasn't alone. My chest felt tight and my stomach tensed. I tried to stay calm. I noticed a short corridor behind the desk. It led to a row of offices on one side. I saw a door marked maintenance. I figured if I wanted to figure out why the power was still on. That was my first stop. I walked past the reception area and pushed on the maintenance door. It was locked. I jiggled the handle, but it wouldn't budge. That's when one of the emergency lights in the corridor flickered. The sudden change in brightness caught me off guard. My breath got shallow and I paused. The lock didn't give it all. I checked my phone to see if I had reception, but it showed 0 bars. Typical, I thought. Old buildings like this sometimes had thick walls or some weird wiring that blocked signals. I turned back to the corridor and paused. Something didn't feel right. The air was stale, but I swore. I felt a cool draft run along the floor. It brushed against my ankles like a slow breeze. It shouldn't have been there. Not in a locked-up place, the corridor stretched ahead with several office doors on either side. The red glow of an exit sign at the far end gave me a little guidance. I decided to move forward and check each door, hoping one might be open or lead to an electrical panel. I reached the first door. It was unmarked. Just a blank wooden door with a standard knob. I reached out and turned the handle locked. The emergency light above my head flickered. The second my fingers touched the metal, I stepped back and stared at the flickering bulb. My heart pounded. I told myself it was just a coincidence, maybe a bad connection. Still, my palms were sweaty. I wiped them on my jeans and kept moving. The second door had a small label. It said Office 1. Oh, 1. I tried it, same thing. Locked as I touched the knob. Another emergency light flickered farther down the corridor this time. That weird sense of being watched crept up on me again. My neck felt stiff, like I wanted to keep glancing behind me, but I forced myself to keep my eyes forward. I took a few more steps and noticed a single fluorescent bulb hanging at the end of the hall. It looked like a maintenance light. Not an official fixture it was on, but it kept buzzing and flickering. I could hear that electrical hum getting louder as I walked closer. Underneath that bulb was a door with a sign saying stairwell. I figured that might lead me to other floors, maybe a basement or a utility room. The second I rested my hand on the doorknob, the overhead light flickered 3 times fast. My stomach dropped and my throat went dry. It almost felt like something was warning me, but I wasn't about to turn back yet. I twisted the knob and it opened. The door made a slow squeak, loud enough to make my skin crawl inside the stairwell. The smell changed. It was damp, like mildew water stains ran down the concrete walls. A single red emergency light glowed above the first flight of stairs. I felt a little surge of relief, because I needed a new direction to explore if I wanted to find a breaker box. It was probably either in the basement or on the ground floor in a locked maintenance room. Since I couldn't get in there on this level, I thought maybe I'd find something upstairs. I started climbing. My boots echoed on the metal steps. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, steady but too fast for my comfort. It felt like every hair on my arm was standing up each step I took. I paused and listened. I was expecting to hear footsteps behind me, but I only heard the dull thump of my own. Still, I sensed something or someone around me. When I reached the next floor, I pushed open the stairwell door. This corridor looked similar to the first one, except the walls were peeling and the smell of old carpet was stronger. Another flickering light hung overhead, casting uneven shadows on the walls. I noticed 4 closed doors. A small waiting area sat to the right with a couple of torn chairs. The windows at the end of the hall were boarded up from the outside. No light came in from there. I went to the first door on the left. The label said conference room. I tried the knob, locked the light overhead, dimmed for a moment. My heart jerked. I glanced up, half expecting it to go out completely, but it steadied. I let out a breath and tested the door on the right side, which said storage. That one opened without a fight. I stepped inside. The storage room was cramped with dusty shelves and boxes stacked against the walls. A few old file cabinets sat near the back. The faint light from the corridor made long shadows inside. I ran my hand across one of the shelves and coughed as a cloud of dust rose up. I stayed quiet for a moment, waiting. No sounds came from outside. No footsteps. My heart was pounding so loud I could feel it in my chest. I opened a few boxes, found old office supplies, some binders, nothing important. I didn't see any electrical panels or anything that would explain why the building still had partial power. I left the storage room and tried the conference room door one more time, just in case it stayed locked. The next door said break room. That door was slightly ajar. I nudged it open with my foot. The inside was dark, but I made out a small kitchenette and a round table with a few chairs. I stepped inside and reached for a switch on the wall, but flipping it did nothing. No overhead light turned on. Then I noticed the humming of a fridge that stunned me. The building was supposed to be shut down, but this fridge was definitely running. I moved closer and touched it. The sides were cold and vibrating. I opened the door. The interior light was off, but I heard the motor humming. I saw a couple of empty water bottles on the shelf. I put my hand on them. They were cold. That meant the fridge had power and someone had been around or at least had used it. Not too long ago, I felt a rush of adrenaline. My throat was tight and I wanted to get out of there, but I also wanted answers. I shut the fridge, turned around, and saw the corridor lights flicker again. It wasn't just one light this time. The entire hall seemed to blink. My pulse raced the door, made a soft creak. It sounded like it moved on its own. I stepped back into the corridor and glanced around. No one was there, but I felt my skin crawl. I could hardly swallow. I headed back to the stairwell. Each door I passed gave me the same uneasy feeling, like something was behind it. The emergency lights overhead kept flickering in short bursts. When I got to the stairwell door, it was slightly open. I remembered closing it behind me. I felt sweat forming on my forehead. My hand shook when I reached for the knob. I pulled the door open wider, bracing myself for someone on the other side, but I saw nothing. Just the same dim red glow in the stairwell. I started moving up again. I wanted to check if the roof access or a higher floor might have the main breaker or a control panel. My boots felt heavier with each step. The air in the stairwell felt thicker, like the humidity was rising. I could see water dripping down the walls in some places, leaving dark streaks. A pipe somewhere behind the concrete might have been leaking when I reached the third floor. The lights in the stairwell flickered more intensely. I rested a hand on the railing, feeling the metal vibrate with every flicker. It was subtle, but it was there. I pushed the door open. It resisted a bit, almost like someone was on the other side, but it gave way. After a second, this floor's hallway was darker. Only one emergency light worked, and it was near the far end. The doors here looked the same as below, but they were spaced farther apart. I guess these might have been larger offices. My eyes locked onto a metal door at the end of the corridor that looked heavier and more reinforced than the others. I had a hunch it might lead to a utility room or something related to building maintenance. As I approached, the single working emergency light flickered. My muscles felt tense and my nerves were on edge, but I couldn't turn around. Now I had to see what was behind that door. My hand was shaking as I gripped the knob. It didn't turn. The door was locked. I saw a small keypad on the wall next to it, but no power light on the keypad. I pushed the door anyway. Nothing. I tried pulling it. Stayed shut. Then the light above me flickered again more rapidly, and the corridor dimmed for a second. I let go of the knob and stepped back. My mouth felt dry and my head started to ache from the tension. A noise behind me made me freeze. It sounded like a single footstep on the hard floor. I spun around, scanning the darkness. Nothing moved. The corridor was empty. My ears were ringing. I took a slow breath to steady myself, then decided I'd had enough. Without any stain, when he was sharing details of the incident, the detective Rodermel didn't do a full forensic search of the crime scene because he wanted to wait for Sheila's autopsy to be released first. Unfortunately, that didn't happen because Sheila Danny's ultra-Orthodox Jewish family was against it because of their religious beliefs. After this, Detective Rodermel couldn't do much in his investigation and the case was officially closed. The news of Sheila's death had shocked everyone close to her. However, like Detective Rodermel, some of Sheila's family and friends were also suspicious about the cause of her death. Eve, her sister, revealed that Sheila didn't like taking baths and always preferred taking showers. One of Sheila's friends, Stephanie Goldman, also agreed with Eve's statement and had said that Sheila never even took a short bath. Even after her burial, many members of Sheila Danny's family suspected that she was a victim of cold-blooded murder by her ex-husband Rod Coughlin. The suspicion soon turned into a firm belief when Sheila's estate attorney Lance Meyer informed the family that Sheila was scheduled to meet him on the day of her death to remove her ex-husband from her will. The reason for an increasing number of fingers pointing at Rod Coughlin was simple. He stood to get $5.2 million in the event of her death while he was still in her will. In light of these new shocking details, Sheila's family approached the authorities and requested them to reopen the case and continue with their investigation. Detective Rodermel and Detective Francis Brennan, the two lead investigators in the case, informed the family they couldn't investigate Sheila's death further because the case was officially closed. The detectives also told the Dannis that the only way to reopen the case was if they allowed an autopsy of the victim's body. However, that was out of the question because of their religious beliefs. When the police refused to help them without an autopsy, the family took matters into their own hands and hired a private investigator, Michael Swain, to get to the bottom of Sheila's death and Rod Kinn's role in it. When Michael Swain visited Sheila's apartment, he noticed that the screws of the cabinet hinges had been pulled out by design, and someone like Sheila, who had a lean build, couldn't rip off the hinges. Even while falling, he also noticed that there was no bath towel in the bathroom, which was quite unusual because, according to Rod, Sheila had gone to the bathroom to take a bath. 2 months after Sheila's death, her family agreed for her autopsy to be